Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Strife's Sanctum podcast. My name is Citizen Strife, and I have a guest this week. We haven't done one of these in a while, but it seemed appropriate given what we're talking about today, because this was your idea. Say hello to Leigh, everybody. How you doing?
Okay, I've had a lot of coffee today.
That's good, because I've had a lot of caffeine too. Um, and not that I would need it, considering what we're talking about, because again, this was a show, Fruits Basket. I think the time you mentioned it to me was during our Resident Evil playthrough,
Well,
and
probably.
we were, yeah, as we were. Let's face it, we were trying to find something to talk about to get through that fucking mansion, and this came up, and then you described it, and a few months go by, and I watch it myself, and I watched the original, and it was a bad idea. I got like 3 or 4 episodes in, and then I remembered that there was a different version, an actual version, a Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood sort of thing, where they actually made the entire show following the finished product. And then we decided to watch it recently. And holy shit, was it good.
Oh,
So we wanted to talk about it as quickly as possible.
well,
Um,
let me
so it's
tell
like
you
2 days later.
something. The original version, I've actually seen it all the way through 3 times. It just
That's,
doesn't, it just goes away from the source material in some places and doesn't cover the entire story.
yeah. Well, I mean, there are some things that I'm kind of glad it doesn't touch on, but I'll worry about that when we worry about it. But from what I remember of the original was it was very slow.
It,
And when it comes to comedies, or even when it comes to dramas, pacing can mean the death of a show.
mm,
And it was just, I think honestly, it was like the way that Kyo acts in that original
um,
and how the Prince Yuki fan club acts
oh
that really
Jesus.
took me out of it early.
Yeah, the Prince Yuki fan club was like really overbearing. You're just
Yeah, because
lucky.
didn't you tell me they didn't even have names?
The leader didn't. I don't think any of the ones that they had on screen had actual names. But I'll tell you
Okay.
something, they had this like really, really, really long, like 2 minute introductory cheer kind of thing. And it was just like it was 2 minutes too much. It
Oh, it
it
sounds like a
was
Family Guy sketch.
it was. Think of Peter Griffin singing Shaboopy in in the football episode where he was one of the Patriots.
Mm-hmm.
Completely
But worse.
unnecessary, completely unnecessary, and it wasn't even
Mhm.
entertaining.
Sounds kind of like late '90s, early 2000s anime comedy in a nutshell. Sounds very bad.
Oh yeah.
Sounds very
Let me put it
not
this
good.
way. The worst episode you can think of something like Dragon Ball Z where they spend a whole half an hour just trying to summon up enough energy to go Super Saiyan was more entertaining than that.
Ouch. So that's why we decided to watch 2019 instead.
But then
And I
I told you
go.
about the 2019 reboot, and I told
Mhm,
you it was so much better. Like, a
mhm.
lot of people, they actually debate which one is better, and it's not that I saw the reboot. I finally got a chance to see the reboot um, a couple of years ago after the whole thing had finally been dubbed in English,
Mhm.
and I was completely blown away by how amazing it was.
Right.
And
And I
and
oh,
that was
go
without
ahead.
comparing it to the original one. I mean, if you want to make the comparison, I think the reboot is a little bit better because its pacing is more realistic for the sort to cover as much source material as it covers,
Yeah.
and it doesn't have so much empty-headed filler.
Oh God. Yeah,
And
and to be
the
fair,
the
oh,
character
sorry, I keep.
development, the character development is there, and you can see it from beginning to end. You can see the character development.
Yeah, that was exactly what I saw because the way we approached this was 4 to 5 episode spurts every couple of days with some friends or just by ourselves.
Hmm.
And like 2 or 3 episodes in, or if not even the first episode, I was like, oh, okay, I get it now. I
Hmm.
want it. And for me, what I found most exciting wasn't so much the comedic aspects being improved by the pacing or even the character dynamics. I felt that they went through the more serious, when they needed to get to the serious bits. And we can talk about Tora right away when we get to it, is when she gets to those moments where she digs deep and talks, it's like, oh, this doesn't feel shoehorned in. This doesn't feel like, oh, we're padding the runtime. No, this actually feels like the comedy and the drama actually makes sense. And this is what the show is going to be. It just felt like it flowed perfectly and it didn't seem shoehorned. I do think there were parts of the comedy that weren't, sometimes the school stuff, but here and there. But by and large, it's just like,
Hmm.
this was what I forgot. This is what I didn't see. Oh, okay.
Well, the school
um,
stuff had its purpose too. I mean, you can't just show what they're doing outside of school because school was a big part of their lives.
levity. And
Okay, so
and yeah.
talking about the plot, let's go ahead and just let's talk about the plot.
Yeah. What I will say I found that because of the zodiac, so the concept is we have several school children in a high school that know each other. One of them, Toru Honda, is the main character. She is homeless at this stage or is living with her grandfather and, let's just face it, less than stellar family. That's a trend.
Well,
Less than stellar
when
parents
the
and
when the
grandparents
show
and stuff.
when the show starts, Toru is an orphan. Her father died when
Mm,
she was like 3 or 4, and then her mother died a few months before the start of the show.
she was living in a tent.
Her mother died less than a year before the show starts. She has been living with her grandfather because all of her relatives were fighting over who would have to take her on. None of her
That is a
relatives wanted her because her mother was a problem child and her father ended up becoming like the black sheep of the family for marrying her. So
and that reflected
nobody,
badly on Toru.
the only person who wanted her was her grandfather, and that was because her grandfather, not only did he love his son, he actually came to love her mother too. Her father was Katsuya Honda, and her mother was Kyoko. I don't think they ever said what her last name was, so we're just gonna say Kyoko Honda because she got married,
Yeah.
obviously. Um, but so at the start of the show, Toru's grandfather has decided that his daughter decided that she wanted to live with him and bring her 2 children with her. And he's allowing them to move in, but before they can move in, his house needs renovations done. So he asks Toru to find some friends to stay with while the renovations are happening because he's going to go stay with his daughter until there's enough until they can all move into the house together. And she just doesn't have enough room for both of them. And she's a bitch, but we'll get to that later. Um,
Every person who's a father, mother, brother, let's just say everybody who's anything is a bitch in the show. That is a trend.
oh yeah, it really is. So she decides to just she's gonna be she decides she's gonna be living by herself after school anyway. She may as well go ahead and prove she can do it. She goes and buys a tent and pitches the tent out in the middle of the woods so that it's not too far out of town so she can still get to school and everything, but it's far enough to where she won't have to deal with the embarrassment of people finding out she's homeless.
Mm-hmm.
And on her way out of the tent one morning, she comes across this house that's kind of set off in the middle of nowhere. And she sees these cute little zodiac figurines, all of the animals of the Chinese zodiac, sitting out on the front deck to dry because they've just been freshly painted. And she's looking, and while she's looking at them, the owner of the house comes out and introduces himself, and she just was talking about how she's admiring his figurines, but the cat is missing. And it's she had been told this story when she was a child about the legend of the zodiacs and how they had all been invited by their god to take part in a banquet, and how the cat had been tricked by the rat and left out.
Hmm.
So all the other 12 animals gathered for this banquet except for the cat, who didn't know the banquet was happening that day. And as a result, he was cast out of the zodiac and made like a permanent outsider. So she is a dedicated Year of the Cat fan because she felt so bad for what happened to the cat in the story.
Oh, I want to interject something and ask a question.
Hmm.
I didn't feel myself because I know there's what 60 some episodes, 63 I think was what we ended up watching.
Yeah,
They spent a good half of a very late episode discussing that Chinese zodiac, the story. They don't bring that up early though. They bring it up in like the intro.
they do
Toru's
bring it
talking
up,
about it.
or yeah, they do bring it up early. It's
What I
just
what
that
I'm saying,
it's in the final season when you hear the real story and not the one
oh,
that's been passed down.
okay. Because my
This
concern, I think, was
the folktale that
they
they're all going off of, it the folktale is just kind of how it's been. You know how things are altered when it goes from word of mouth over generations?
the Mandela effect
Not necessarily the Mandela effect, it's just things have a
or
way of being
telephone.
the telephone effect, yes. Things have a way of being changed as they're passed from one generation to the next. So, like it's each person who learns a story embellishes it in their own way. So in this
Right.
case, the original story had been changed a little bit here and there until it was the way they perceive it now in the present, that the cat had been
Because
tricked and left out.
yeah, the reason I bring this up is I'm wondering if like a version of that god and the animals, if they could have told that in a way and then brought that back itself. I think it's like they mention because what ends up happening is they Toru meets Yuki, Kyo, and Shigure. Shigure is the owner of the house. What she finds out is that when she hugs them or any other person of the opposite sex hugs them, they turn into animals of the zodiac.
Hmm.
Yuki being a rat, Kyo being the cat, and Shigure being a dog.
And as the show goes on, she ends up meeting all of the different zodiac animals,
Mm,
spirits. They're
my
all they basically say that they're possessed by the spirit of that zodiac animal.
right. My concern, I think, was they bring it up, but they don't like go into detail other than, oh, you're the cat, you suck. I think they tell it from the people's perspective, and I think that's fine. What I think though is like having a version of that. The god is there, the animals are there, like the animals. That scene from way late in the show, done early enough so that like the zodiac stuff is explained maybe in like episode 2 or episode 3, like when she finds out that this thing,
Well,
because it's like
they tell
then
her in the beginning when she finds out their secret. They
hmm,
explain it to her as best they can. That
right.
it's just like the story went, that that the Zodiac story happened and way back in the past, because the cat had not been at the banquet, he's forever ostracized from being part of the actual Zodiacs and has to always sit on the outside, and they have to redo the banquet every year.
Mhm.
So, like,
Um,
that's the explanation that they all go by because that's what they've all been raised to think too.
do you think that they could have expanded more on the Zodiac stuff itself, or would that have bogged down the show even further?
It wouldn't have
Like,
served any purpose
oh,
because
because it's only surface level stuff.
it was basically something for the something to help the understanding of it later for like,
Hmm.
because basically the final season is all pretty heavy emotional stuff,
Yes.
and having the original legend there is kind of like a way to help the viewer understand what was really happening with these bonds. It's
Right. Because that
basically
stuff isn't it isn't
once
explained until Akito shows up, which is
it
like what,
it
10
isn't
episodes
until
in anyway.
it isn't until they start talking about Akito. Akito is the head of their family. The head of all of the zodiacs, they're all part of a particular family, the Soma family. And the family head is a man, we're going to go with that for now, named Akito. Akito is actually pretty young to be the head of a family, but he's not an elder. He's actually a pretty young person. In fact, Shigure is older than Akito.
Yeah, it's just like she's like 16, 17, give or take.
Actually, she's closer to like 20 or 21.
Oh, okay. I
When
wasn't sure.
okay, that we're foreshadowing here a little bit here, but that
Oh yeah,
scene that
spoilers, duh.
yeah, that scene where
A
they
little late for
showed
that.
that scene where they showed Kurino Hattori Ayame and Shigure running up to Ren to, and that Ren realizing that she's pregnant with Akito. That all happened when they were like 6 or 7.
Mm,
They were still pretty young, so they're not like too much older than her because Shigure is
yeah.
28.
Okay, yeah, because that is an important thing to mention. Is it's Shigure's house that is kind of the main, uh,
Mm-hmm.
other than going to school or the main Soma estate,
Yeah,
which is
the
essentially like
house.
super, super, super rich Yakuza esque family house, basically.
It's
Shigure is in an offshoot somewhere.
Shigure. Yeah, he does not live on the main Soma estate. The main Soma estate is so huge it takes up more than a city block,
Um,
and just the inner circle of the way one of the Somas describes it to Toru later on in the show is in the inner circle there's about 50 families living in there, and the outer circle has about 150 more families in it, but
God.
they're all Somas.
Yep, it's a Yakuza family, but
It's a
bunch.
gigantic family clan, and
Yeah.
their entire compound, the Soma estate, takes up so much space in the city.
Yeah, and that's the thing that the show has to contend with is they slowly have to peel back the layers of this whole Soma thing because that is kind of the main arc and the main thing. But you have Toru finding this stuff out almost kind of in the way like say Tidus in Final Fantasy X has to like learn all of the stuff in Spira. It's like she doesn't know jack, so she slowly has to peel back. Okay, we're being told this thing in this episode. You learn about this character in this one, and the first season is like introducing
Hmm.
who is Kyo, who is Yuki, who is Shigure, and
I
I
think
said like
by the
the pacing
end,
is great.
by the somewhere along the beginning of season 2, she'll have met all of the Somas except for one.
Mm.
She doesn't
And they
meet
say
him.
him till very late.
She doesn't meet the last one until towards the end of season 2.
Yeah, they saved him for later because they were like, "Yep, we're getting serious now."
There's
um,
one Soma that Akito will not let out of her sight, basically. He is like her permanent side piece because he's got a secret. And we're
yes,
not going to talk about that yet. But let's finish getting into the plot here. So,
right.
like I was explaining, Toru comes up on Shigere's house, now that he's introduced who Shigure is. She comes up
Mhm.
on Shigere's house and realizes that her classmate Yuki lives there too. She doesn't call him Yuki though. They're not on informal terms. She just calls
Yeah,
him by
he
his last
just
name, Soma.
Soma, I think.
Yeah, he calls her Miss Honda and she calls him Soma. They're not on
Mm.
first name basis yet. They barely know each other. They're just in the same class. And um so they walk to school together that day. And she mentions that she lives nearby and he's confused by that because they live on Soma property. So there shouldn't be anybody nearby because this is Shigure's little house in the woods.
I've got a tent, so I'm there too.
But then later, later that night, they see her. Shigure and Yuki are coming back from dinner. They've had to go eat out because neither of them can cook. And they're walking along and they see her going to this tent and he's like, that must have been what she meant about living near here. So they go to talk to her and try to get her to not have her tent there because the cliffs are not stable. In fact, even while she's having tea with them in their house, there's a rock slide, and it takes out her tent. And it's a good thing she wasn't in it because she would have been seriously injured, if not killed. But she freaks out because the picture of her mother is in there. That
Right.
picture is life or death to her.
Yeah. Getting to that, Toru has these spurts in the show, and I don't know if it happens way later, but especially early, she'll get these monologues where she describes living with her mother and what her mother means and trying to kind of live up to that standard of what she's supposed to be and almost kind of like giving advice. It's kind of profound, especially coming from somebody who's labeled as kind of an idiot some of the time, or airheaded, or a klutz,
She is a
because Toru can kind of be everything.
Toru is a cute, klutzy little space cadet, and we love her. And I say space cadet because she is kind of an airhead sometimes. She tends to space out when she's too deep in her own thoughts. And she does that a lot. She'll stop being aware of her surroundings and she'll get lost inside her own thoughts because she's actually thinking about her problems and the problems of all of her friends. And she'll get caught up in that and stop paying attention to her surroundings.
Yeah, and there are definitely times where she, and admittedly too often, will think of them first rather than herself.
She always puts everyone else above herself. Toru is kind of like too good for this world. And her mother sees her that way too. The best thing she's ever done with her life is have this little girl. Toru and her mother are inseparable. They love each other so much. And it's really devastating to Toru when her mother is suddenly taken away from her.
Mhm. Yeah. And that's really the point where Shigure, being the owner of the house, and to be fair, at that point, he's just a laugh riot because he's the older part. He's the owner. He's a
He
self-made
is,
writer.
oh my god, and she doesn't even know this at the time. She doesn't find out until episodes later that he's a writer. But it's
Mhm.
so when he saw her living in the tent, he started laughing uncontrollably. And when he laughed until, holy shit, he laughed until until they had walked all the way and were in his house having tea.
Yeah,
He
so
kept laughing. He was still laughing in that scene. It was so funny. Uh,
Shigeru's whole thing is he's never serious because you can never tell where the lies begin and the truth began, or the lies end, and all that. He's two-faced, and it works because you can't really
it's not really that
ever
he's
know.
two-faced. He's the dog of the zodiac, so he's very canine. He's
Mm,
always got his own interests at heart.
mm.
And
Yeah,
he will
and
do he's loyal to a point. Like he's super loyal like dogs are, but his loyalty is in
himself.
his not just himself, but in his interests. Like if there's
Hmm.
something he wants, if there's a person he wants, he's completely loyal to that person and will do anything, whether it's ethical or not, to get what he wants.
Yeah, and so he decides to take Toru in as a kind of live-in housekeeper of sorts. And that's where the Kyo and Yuki end up staying as well. So it ends up being
Yu-
Toru,
Yuki is
Shigure,
already
Yuki.
there. Yuki is
Yes,
already there.
Kyo shows up later.
He has kind of rescued Yuki from the family estate, and he's giving Yuki
Mhm.
a place to live while he goes to school. And then
Yes, and that story's dark too.
and then and then we have Kyo. We haven't even talked about
Oh,
Kyo yet.
no.
Kyo
There's too much to this show. It's crazy.
Yuki is the rat of the zodiac, and Kyo is the cat. And we've already talked about how the cat was tricked out of the banquet by the rat.
Stupid
Well,
rat.
in this same way, Kyo feels this stigma very deeply because in the Soma family, the cat is always hated. Everyone just, they treat the cat like he's not even human, like he's a monster.
Yeah, it's kind of funny you mention that. We'll get to that later.
Yes, we
Um,
will, but basically, everyone in the Soma family that knows the story of the zodiac and they know the secret of the zodiac animals, they all treat Kyo like he's not worthy of being even given any kind of kindness at all.
right.
His
So that manifests. Oh, go ahead.
his own father wants him. His own father won't have anything to do with him.
Yeah.
His real father,
So
anyway.
it tends to manifest early as just you stupid rat. I'm gonna beat the shit out of you. So they get
His
into fights like every 5 seconds.
Oh yeah, Kyo's main mission at the start of the show is to finally prove that he's worthy of being a Soma by beating Yuki, or
Yeah.
that
It
damn rat, as he refers to him.
stupid rat. Yeah.
Girly
Every
boy.
little
That's what
thing.
he calls him that
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. So they do that all the time. So it's essentially like it manifests sort of as like a love triangle in a weird way because they both know who Toru is, that they won't explain it until later why that is the case. And that's kind of the
Well,
beauty of the show is it's not
Yuki
really.
actually didn't know at first that that's who Toru was. It's not until later when
Mhm.
he sees the hat in her room.
Right.
And the hat is very
Um
symbolic, and we'll get to that later too.
yeah, because Yuki is the goody two shoes trying to please everybody, but is also like put on a pedestal by schoolmates. And we haven't even gotten to the school part yet.
Oh
Basically, Yuki has
Jesus.
his own fan club. He's hounded by everybody because he's the cutest boy you've ever seen, apparently. And Kyo is treated as a fucking idiot
Let's put it
because
this way.
he brings it on himself.
The Prince
You
Yuki
know,
fan club treats him like he's hotter than any little J-pop idol you've ever seen.
but to balance that out, you have Toru's friends, Hanajima and Uotani, and they do really well at balancing out the stupid people, the Yuki fan club,
Yes.
and
They
the
they protect
Uotani
her.
and Hanajima.
They when Toru starts to actually become part of Yuki's world.
Mhm.
She's living in Yuki's house, but none of the fan club knows that. She starts getting closer to Yuki. They start becoming friends. The fan club targets Toru because she's encroaching on their territory. They
Mhm.
basically have decided that since they all want Yuki, nobody can actually have him.
Right.
So if he gets
But
close
you
to
have
anybody, they attack.
right, and the thing with like Hanajima and Uotani, and we get episodes about them, but they're always kind of ever present. Is like Hanajima is portrayed as this like occultist witch kind of lady who just dresses in black, and she's almost enjoying the fact that she
She
has that aura.
she's super calm, very gothy, and
Mm.
she never speaks. She never raises her voice.
And her brother can apparently curse people for some reason.
And her
Um,
brother, in a show of solidarity and brotherly affection, acts and dresses just like her.
Uotani, by contrast, is a lot like Toru's mother, like a former gangster girl,
Loud,
like
boisterous,
delinquent, yeah,
former
and very
delinquent.
protective.
Very, very protective. The two of them put together
Um,
are so protective of Toru. If you
mhm,
want to attack Toru, you have to get through them first.
right, and it ends up working in their favor because they kind of show a side of the school stuff because the school stuff is there, but it's only there to add to the friendship because this is a very like friendship heavy or familial kind of show.
Hmm.
It's less about, hey, we're doing this and this. I mean, there are like cultural festival episodes and whatever in school, but it's
Hmm.
not even about that. It's more about what are the Soma situations? How are we tying that into school? How are we tying in other characters into school? Because some of the other Soma characters that we can get into now, I mean, there are like 7 or 8 other characters who I put in kind of they're important, but they're not the Shigure, Yuki, and Kyo. They're the main three they focus on. But then episodes go by, you start seeing other Soma characters. Momiji shows up in school. Haru shows up in school. Some others don't. They are, friends or confidants. Um, but they all get episodes to themselves. And by the end of season one, you see the majority of those characters and they
Hmm.
filter in as the show is progressing. And might as well get into Momiji now because he's kind of the main sub
Oh
character
yeah,
who's oh god, it is so good.
Momiji is adorable. He's a little blonde, half German, half Japanese kid. Excuse me.
I, I'm gonna quote it just a second.
Toru assumes he's a kid, but he's really only a year younger than her.
Mhm.
And boy, does he take advantage of that.
Yes. So another one that comes into school is named Hatsuharu, and he is yeah, Momiji is the rabbit or the hare,
Momiji is the
and very
rabbit,
playful.
and as soon as he meets Toru, he jumps on her and gives her a hug and
Yeah.
transforms into a rabbit because she knows his secret. It's not going to weird her out.
Yeah. Uh, the there is a right like an episode after Momiji shows up is like Haru shows up. Hatsuharu is the ox, and
And
his whole
his
thing is
his form is he turns into a cow. It's hilarious.
moo.
But in the same episode where we meet Momiji, we also meet Hattori.
Mm, I like
And he's
Hattori a lot.
Hattori is the doctor of the Zodiacs, and he's
Yeah, is
Shigure's
he like
best
Shigure's brother or
no
friend? I
best
forget how
friend.
that works. That's what I figured. Yeah, because Hattori almost always shows up when the
Hat-
older members of the
Poor Hattori, he's the only one who can keep them in line.
pretty much.
He is super serious. He's a doctor. He's very intimidating if you
Yeah.
don't know him very
Um,
well.
I do find it strange that early on they focus a lot on Hattori's role as kind of the fixer of the family. Like if anybody finds out that they are the Somas and there's the Zodiac members, that he has to go and erase their memories. He does the Men in Black like
He has a
laser
hypnosis
thing.
trick.
Yeah.
It's a form of hypnosis. He will basically repress those memories so that you don't remember them.
Yeah,
And
and his whole thing is
part
one
of
of
part of
mm,
Hattori's tragedy is that he had to do this with his own fiance.
mm,
This this
um
girl, who is also part of the Soma family, just a distant enough relative to where it's not incest. Uh,
right.
she
I was
found out.
wondering about that.
Now, there's a lot of distant relatives that are part of the Soma family, and that's how they're able to,
Yes, yeah,
yeah,
thank
like
God. Because
distant relatives.
yeah, this show's creepy enough sometimes.
And
Um
she was his assistant as family doctor, and she accidentally found out his secret one day by being a klutz and falling on him.
mhm.
And she and he fell in love. And when they wanted to be together, the family head forbid it and attacked in a way that left Hattori disfigured. Although you don't see it, uh he's got a pretty good replacement. So,
Yeah.
but she's so racked with guilt over it that she sinks into this really deep depression, and finally, just as a mercy, he takes away her memories of them ever being together.
Yeah, and there are instances where other members of the cast are subject to that, or are like, what if Toru gets involved too much, or is that a threat? And it's one
That's
of those
their
things that,
main worry when they invite Toru to come live with them. He has
Mhm.
Shigure actually goes to the head of the family for permission, because as much as he likes to be independent and be by himself, he still does what the head of the family tells him to do.
Yeah, and
And if the head of the family puts the kibosh on it, then he would. If
yeah,
the head of the family's name is Akito, and if Akito
and
says no, then he would go by that, and they would erase Toru's memory. But Toru does the sweetest thing ever. She literally sits there, and when Yuki expresses his concern that her memory might get purged, she asks him, she says, "If my memory does get erased, will you find me and make friends with and befriend me again?"
Mhm.
Because just getting to know him just for the little bit of time that she has known him already meant a lot to her. And it to Yuki, that was probably the most flattering thing anyone has ever said to him up to that point. Because Yuki
Yeah,
has got these doubts about himself.
yeah. That is brought about quite a few times. Yuki's whole thing is he is isolated, quarantined by Akito.
Mm-hmm.
I forget I forget how it works. We have to backtrack to get to Akito first. The reason we keep bringing up Akito is the head of the family, the god who is above this. And Akito has been born and bred to be something special. The bonds of the Zodiac manifest through him. And Akito's whole thing is you will do what I say because our bonds exist and are eternal and you will belong to me. So it always, she, she, whatever, always, Akito looks androgynous. I'm getting confused.
Okay.
For a reason.
Okay, I'm going to go
Did
ahead
we
and
mention
Akito's
we
mother.
should?
I did say Akito's mother was a lady named Ren.
Mhm.
Akito's mother Ren was completely insecure about her child being born a girl and refused to let Akito be raised as a girl. She insisted Akito be raised as a man because the head of the family is always a man.
Have we mentioned
Really,
that mothers and fathers in this show are considered assholes?
really, she was completely fucking jealous that
Yes.
her husband, Akira, was so enamored with his daughter. She was jealous over the father's love for a baby girl.
And note, the, it was not a disturbing kind of love. It was a
No,
very
it was
supportive and
genuinely oh my god, I have a
Genuinely,
baby, she's the best thing in the world kind of thing.
right.
Akito's father, Akira, was amazingly sweet. He was just this lonely boy who fell for one of
He's
the
also
maids in the
sickly, I think.
house. Yeah, he was. The same way Akito is. Only in Akira's case, he actually was kind of sickly.
Yeah.
Mostly, Akito's sickness is usually just kind of in her head. She's kind of a hypochondriac.
Ugh.
But she is prone to catching cold easily. Uh, but basically, the Ren was obsessed with her husband and thought that her husband shared the same intensity of love for her that she shared for him, and basically didn't want any other females intruding on their time. She was jealous of any female that took his attention away from her, including her own daughter. Her husband, Akira, was raising Akito to believe that as the future head of the Zodiac, she she would be irreplaceable, that these bonds were eternal and made her special. They would never ever be broken. She would always have the love of the Zodiac members. And Ren was basically telling her that's complete and total bullshit. These bonds are just as fake as any other so-called bond of love. The only real love is mine and Akira's love for each other. Like, she was trying to say that theirs was the only real love that existed. And that these bonds were going to break and they would all abandon her just the way everyone else abandons everyone else. She basically just made Akito completely paranoid about whether anyone even loved her or not. Like, genuinely loved her. So she became desperate to cling onto them all
Mhm.
and keep them as tight in her inner circle as possible.
Right. And this ends up manifesting, and this is one of the stranger things in the show, but this is where it really hits. And the reason we bring this up is Akito's entire way of talking to other Soma members is very distinctive depending on who she's talking to, but almost always is done with condescension, paranoia,
Hmm.
frustration, pain,
As
malice, and is just, oh,
when Akito is a child, she's very sweet. Like
mm,
when she finally meets Yuki. Yuki is not that much younger than her. Yuki is like maybe 16 at the start of the
mm,
story.
yeah,
He's already in his second year of high school, so he's around Toru's age, and Toru is 16.
right,
Um, and Akito is around maybe somewhere like 20, 21, something like that.
right,
So there's not that much of an age difference between them. When Yuki was a child, his mother just basically said, "Okay, you belong to Akito now. Go." Akito
yeah,
Akito believed that the rat was supposed to be the god's favorite because the rat had been the first to arrive at this so-called banquet in the story.
mm,
So she believed that the god had a special affection just for the rat, and Yuki became her constant playmate. And finally, after all this time, like maybe a year or so, constant, constant presence with Yuki. Like they had to be together all the time. She finally got a spoiled little brat fit and got bored. Especially with Yuki was a kind of boring kid. And I don't hold that against him at all. He was raised to be like he was basically raised to think he didn't matter and that he was useless.
mm,
Especially after Akito kind of snapped when she started really coming into puberty, I guess. She
yeah,
and her mother really went to town on her with that too.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, she became more and more paranoid that eventually she would be abandoned. And she started to tell Yuki that they were always going to be, that he was tied to her no matter what. And whatever he really thought or felt didn't matter because he didn't matter.
Yeah.
And that he was useless. The only purpose that he had for his life was to be her plaything. So Yuki grew up with some really deep insecurities. He has no form of self identity. He had no real major opinions about anything. And the only thing that he knew was that he was being constantly abused and hidden away from people. And he was desperate to escape that. He begged Shigure to come live with him to get him away from
Mm-hmm.
that. And
Yeah.
Shigure relented. He took Yuki with him. Whether Akito
Right.
wanted him to or not, he actually did do that. He he also did something else to make Akito jealous. I don't know if you picked it up, but he slept with her mother.
Oh,
Yes, he did.
I don't want to remember that.
But he
His line I think was, it's one of those times you use your femininity as a weapon against me. I was just like, God, these people are messed up.
aren't
Um,
they?
yeah. So again, Yuki gets quarantined into things. Akito would
She hid
not
him.
allow
She hid him away in
Haru
a dark room.
Yeah. So Haru and Isuzu, another member of the Zodiac, they were trying to be together. They would fall in love with each other, but Akito would abuse them or, lock them away. Hattori would usually just be dismissed outright. Momiji would be like, "You're okay, whatever." But
Basically,
fine,
as long as they didn't do anything to show that they were less than devoted to her, she was okay. But as soon
yeah.
as they
And
said something about wanting to be with someone else that wasn't her, she flew off the handle.
yes. And again, there are so many other characters like was it Hiro and Kisa? There's
Yeah, he
Kurino who shows up super late. There are just so many Zodiac members. It's hard to just
Kurino didn't actually though. Kurino didn't. Just for some reason his bond broke. And she
yeah.
got when she felt the bond break, she begged him not to leave her.
Mm.
And he relented and promised to stay.
Yeah, and
Because
there
to
is a side
him,
story. Oh, sorry.
all he sees when he looks at her is a sad, crying little girl. That's what he sees when he looks at her. And
Yeah.
he put her needs ahead of his own. The way
Yeah,
Toru always does.
because there's a side story with Kurino and Utani, um, and they sort of fall for each other. They sort of don't, and there's like, will they, won't they? But
We're
Kurino
getting way ahead of
mentions,
ourselves too.
yeah, Kurino mentions that it's like, I can't do that. Without me, Akito has nobody.
Well, that's what
It's
he
kind of
thinks,
like an
but that's not the truth.
right, but he is obligated. That's in his mind. He's obligated to an extent. I mean, Akito is just messed up, but again, you see all these competing interests of all these different characters, and whether they're related to other characters, they bounce back and forth, and it all ends up coming into Toru or Akito, and it ends up feeding into the narrative that they're building throughout season one, season two,
So
and
you've
Toru ends up meeting Akito, and that's where it really kicks off.
Toru meets Akito in season one, and you've kind of named some of the other members, but we haven't talked about who they are.
Mm,
There's Momiji, he's the rabbit.
yep.
Hatsuharu is
You
the
want a lollipop? I had to do it.
he's
Knew I was gonna.
Hatsuharu is the like Strife said, he's the ox and his form is a cow. Some of them
Yeah, he
actually
flies
take
off the
on
handle and blows stuff up every once in a while. He just
um
does.
Hattori is the dragon, but his form is a seahorse. He's deeply ashamed of this, by the way. Then there's Kagura. She's the boar. and she is totally a
No
enthusiastically
fanboy.
in love with Kyo, or at least that's what she
Which
thinks.
we'll get into later.
Oh yeah, she's and then let's see, who else do we have? We
Hero
have
and Keys. Well, Hero is
we
one.
have
I know.
IMA.
Kisa's unaffiliated. Yeah, IMA. We didn't even mention
IMA
him.
is Yuki's older brother. He's at least 10 years older than Yuki.
And he's fantastic. He
And
talks like
he's
this every 5 seconds.
and he's the snake of the zodiac. Just saying the word snake. Ugh. I can't do it. But let's
Nick.
see. Stop.
I don't know what the hell that was. Sorry.
Then we have
But yeah,
let's see, who else? We've got Isuzu, nickname Rin. She is the horse. She's so pretty. Um
I think she takes like outside of Yuki. I think she takes the brunt of the abuse from Akito.
Akito threw
So
her
much.
out of a freaking window.
Yeah, and then locked her up in a cage.
Locked her up in
Another
the
thing we'll
cat's
get to.
cage. Every single cat, like, this is how far ostracized the cat is from everybody. At some point in the cat's life, they are confined into a shed with bars on the windows and a padlock on the door. They're fed, they're fed very well, and they're kept alive in this little room, but it's kind of
Unless you're
like
a Suzu, I guess.
it's kind of like the shack of shame,
Ugh.
because the cat has to be ashamed of being alive, apparently.
Mm.
But so glad at the end when Akito makes the decision to have it demolished.
Um,
Basically, so let's see, who have we not said yet? I know we're
yeah,
missing
'cause
somebody. We have Kisa. Kisa is the tiger. She's adorable. She is just this little girl. She's like maybe 10 or 11. And then Hiro is the sheep.
I
And
hate Hero.
he's really, oh my God, he's really not as bad as he is when you first meet him though. He's kind of
No,
like
but odd.
he's kind of like Tsundere. He doesn't want to admit that he's a little soft marshmallow.
Yeah, and then except when Kisa's involved, and he's like, "Oh my god, no, never mind,
Like,
no."
oh my God, the summer thing when he's like, why do I want to go to some stupid summer beach thing? And then Kisa's like, but will you go? And he's like, okay.
Yeah, gee. So,
Oh God, it was so
but
funny. And he even softens up to Toru. He really
yeah,
does. And
um,
just his biggest thing, his mother ends up during the course of the show. Hiro's mother gets pregnant with another baby. And he is so looking forward to being a big brother, but he's afraid that if the baby is a girl, he won't be able to help with the baby at all. And he
mm,
deeply wants to be a big brother. And then the baby is born and it's a girl and he can't hold her at first. But
mm,
then towards the end of the show, when everyone feels their bonds breaking, he feels his break, and the first thing he does is pick up his baby sister and hold her.
yeah. Um, Talking about the bonds breaking, what that essentially means is Akito's hold on the people and the mind games that she would play. It would also mean the curse that they would switch into an animal form disappears. So a lot of this ends up happening mostly because they fall for other people. A
Well,
lot
it's
of
not just
Fruits
that,
Basket.
it's the curse is in place because of something the god did. The
Mm,
god made this, he cast a spell to have everyone be reunited over and over and over again in their next lives so they could keep
mm,
having banquets forever, eternally. And the
right.
real reason why the cat was ostracized is because the cat said, but that's
You
not
didn't
what
want
I
it.
wanted. That's not what I don't need that. And everybody thought, including the god, thought that it meant that the cat was throwing away this wonderful gift of love that the god had given all of them. But really, the cat saw through it. It was like, you've shown me so much love over my lifetime that I don't need to have eternity stuck with you. I feel loved enough to be able to move on past this. And the the god was really just afraid of being alone and abandoned again, and that's why
Mhm.
he cast the spell for eternity. So that's really why the cat is ostracized, is because all the other members of the zodiac thought that the cat was trying to throw away a wonderful gift that they'd all been given.
Yeah, and there's another issue with Kyo being the cat,
And
that the
it's,
cat god also has a different transformation too.
they do. They also have an alternate form that is really ugly, monstrous, and very stinky.
Ugh.
Like it produces this horrible smell. Poor
Yeah,
Toru,
I wouldn't even.
when Toru sees it, the her the first thing she does is she bends over a tree and throws up, to be honest.
Oh, oh,
That's how extreme her reaction was, but she still chases Kyo down and tells him that yes, she's scared, but she still wants to be there with him and not just leave him abandoned like everyone else.
right. And Kyo's
That
character arc is one of the cruxes of the show. I mean, even more so
mhm.
than Yuki changing, um,
Yuki
because of
goes
how he
from,
softens.
yeah, Kyo softens a lot, and it all has to do with how much Toru affects him.
And
He,
I said this, a lot of the second season, Yuki, like, I think they build it, and we talked about this off camera, off record, was it felt like they were building to a love triangle sort of thing, and they do on occasion, but really it ends up being a Kyo romance to Toru after a while, and the
hmm
show just veers into that.
well,
And Yuki goes to other people instead.
Yuki ends up, I think what it is Yuki ends up finally realizing who Toru is. Toru is the first person who actually made him feel like he's not completely useless, like he might actually have a purpose in life. And that happened when they were children. She doesn't remember, she remembers what happened, but not that it was Yuki. When Toru was very little, she was maybe 4, she got lost and her mother couldn't find her. Kyo went looking for her. She didn't know that Kyo knew her mother, but Kyo went looking for her, and it wasn't Kyo who found her. It was Yuki. Yuki
Mhm.
found her, and he was trying to just go get someone to say, "Hey, I found her." And she started following him, and that freaked him out because he didn't want her to trigger his transformation. So he kept
Yeah.
running on ahead of her, and then it got to the point where he'd get too far ahead of her and she would be lost, so he'd go back just enough for her to see where he was, and then he'd start going again. So basically, he led her back to her home. And to keep her from trying to hug him, he put the hat he was wearing on her head.
Mhm.
This is the importance of the hat that I mentioned earlier.
Right.
He this hat was a hat Kyo had gotten for himself. He picked this hat out. He really loved it. His substitute dad, slash martial arts instructor, bought him this hat. And then it blew off of his head one day, and Yuki picked it up. And he refused to take it from Yuki because even as a child, he had been born to. He basically believed that the rat was the reason why everyone hated him. So he hated Yuki because of that. Um, because even as a child, everybody was like, you're a monster. We hate you. You shouldn't even be allowed to be alive. You know, how the hell do you
Yeah,
say that to a child?
and and I always found it strange too because it's not as if Yuki was put on a pedestal by anyone except Akito, but her form of pedestal was not even nice. But they
Oh,
didn't know it.
well, they all put him on a pedestal because he was supposed to be the favorite.
Right. Um but I do find it amazing, especially late, where Kyo and Yuki both say things like, I wanted to be more like you,
They
but you
actually
never
reveal
let me.
that before the show. They actually reveal that earlier on in the show too.
Hmm.
And like one thing that Yuki notices, he's like, Kyo always seems to make friends so easily. I wish I could be more like that. And then Kyo's like, Yuki's always so calm and collected and nothing ever bothers him. I wish I could be more like that. And little,
Stupid
little,
rat.
exactly. It's little by little they realize that there are qualities about each other that they both admire, but they're
Mm.
too stuck in their tradition to ever like get along.
Yeah, and it's not like Shigure helps. He just sits there laughing half the time
Oh
or
God,
even bringing it up.
Oh God, Shigure he sets them on each other the worst way. But
Yeah.
that's just because he's
Um,
bored and he wants something to entertain himself with.
yeah. Getting to Shigure, his story is interesting because his machinations lead him to Akito. I remember Lee mentioning that he slept with Ren and
Hmm.
Akito both
Oh, he
at
hadn't slept
different
with
times.
Akito yet.
He didn't. I thought he did.
No, he's deeply in love with her, but he's waiting for her to return the feeling.
Oh, that's even worse.
But he
That's
made her
because
jealous by sleeping with her mother.
yeah. So it's not like she great because what ends
Because
up happening
she
is
has
oh, go
been
ahead.
she has been sleeping with Kurino,
Mhm.
and he's territorial. He's the dog. Kurino, by the way, is the rooster of the zodiac. When he was still, like, before his curse lifted, he was the zodiac's rooster.
I think something C says like he can no longer fly.
Yeah, because when his form, I think his form was like a sparrow or something. They didn't really, because we don't get to see it. His curse is lifted
Yeah.
by the time we actually meet him. His
Yeah, and
curse had
his is
actually
like
been
late.
lifted for several years before we actually got, by the time we got to meet him. And he says something about how the only thing that he'll really regret about his curse being lifted is that he can't fly anymore.
Mm. And there are hints, mostly through talking with Hattori. Shigure is always kind of brought up as like, what are your reasons? What are you wanting out of this? You kind of get this feeling that the more Akito shows up, the more Shigure's like kind of like angling to be what Kurano is, because Akito and Kurano are together for better or for worse,
Uh huh.
but Shigure wants it and even tells Kurano flat out, he's like, "You have what I have, and I hate you for it."
Yeah,
He's scheming behind everybody's back in a way that I don't think anybody ever notices. Where whether he's helping or hurting them, it doesn't matter to him as long as the bonds break. Because as soon as he does, he'll potentially get what he
he
wants, which is Akito.
see what
Um,
he doesn't know for sure that bond that Kurano's curse is lifted. He knows that
mhm,
Kurano feels different from them somehow for some reason, but he doesn't
yeah,
know why. He thinks that Kurano is still a part of the Zodiac.
right.
He doesn't know. If he knew, he would be like, that's why he proposed this whole thing. Like he made a bet with Akito. I mean, they don't come right out and say he made a bet with her, but he made a bet with her. And
Mm,
basically, he's like, you know, if our curse is completely unbreakable, like you say, then Toru living with us shouldn't make a difference either way.
yeah.
And that's how he manipulated her into letting it happen. So she was like, yeah, sure, she can live with you because You guys all are going to choose me anyway. You have to choose me. It's the curse. But they
Mm,
started forming their own bonds with other people, and forming bonds with other people is what helped break their curse, tying them to her. She's
mm.
been raised to think that if these bonds ever actually did break, she wouldn't exist anymore.
Yeah, and then you
Like
have
that
the Ren situation.
she would literally have no purpose, and
Mm.
that they would all abandon her and not love her at all. And it didn't help that her mother was sitting there feeding her this story by saying that, outside of this curse, nobody loves you, nobody wants you.
Oh,
Nobody wants you. As soon as, if their curse ever does break, they're all going to leave you abandoned. They're all going to abandon you. Nobody loves you.
mm. And
Again,
it
how can
ends up.
you say that to a child?
uh, That's the thing is there's just so much like mean spirited like Kyo's father, Yuki's mother,
I mean,
um,
you
so
hold
many
me up
people are just.
against you hold me up against the parents in this fucking show. I'm like goddamn mother of the year.
It's just sickening sometimes how whether they're related or extended family or just and not even like brothers sisters, it's just mothers or fathers of certain people outside of Kyoko and like Toru's grandpa, like everybody is a complete jerk or an asshole. And it's a weird, like it manifests so many different ways across the
And
entire show
Kyoko's
because
grand
they're talking about those bonds.
Toru's grandfather, he's kind of a jerk in his own way because he refuses to call Toru by her actual name.
Yeah,
He calls her Kyoko all the time. But
you can
honestly, it's not
remember
he's not
everything.
doing it out of malice. It's his own way of keeping Kyoko alive because he really liked her.
Yeah. And there is that weird balance because we're talking about how mean spirited a lot of this is. And yeah, it is, and it's very
His
powerful.
family is
But
mean spirited,
Toru
though.
but Toru has to be kind of this because I want to get into Toru versus Akito because that is where that divide happens. And especially late when Akito is driven completely mad, she does some less than stellar things.
Yeah,
And Toru is
on the receiving end of a couple of them.
a lot of it. Like Kuro is stabbed.
Oh,
He
say that again.
is
Say that
put
again.
in that cage. Kurono was stabbed. Um,
Akito stabbed that poor
so
man
yeah,
in the back.
yes, she goes in to hug him, only to grab a knife and just. I'm like, good God! And then she runs, and then she goes and stabs Toru too. Like,
She cuts
God,
Toru's arm.
twice I think.
She does, yeah. It was
And
two cuts on poor
and
Toru's arm.
right, and what's weird is like as this is going on, we learn a different story playing out. So Akito's whole thing is going on, but while that's happening, Toru and Kyo are like slowly developing feelings, and it comes to a head. Like Kyo is in this like state where he doesn't want to admit that he's in love, but has to get something off his chest. So while the Akito thing's going on, they spend an episode talking about Kyo's relationship with Kyoko, Toru's mother, and what happens. And what ends up happening is Kyoko's in a car wreck. Kyo had a chance to pull her away and probably hug her, but it would have triggered his transformation. He didn't want to do it and just left her.
He
And he
he
tells Toru this thing and then just runs off.
uh-huh.
Yeah. Um,
In
so yeah,
fact, he says probably the most hurtful thing you could have said to Toru at that moment.
yeah.
He tells her
So
that
he
he said he didn't mishear what Kyoko said in her final breath. It's just that Kyoko didn't say the entire thought.
mm,
She was trying to say, if you don't keep your promise, I'll never forgive you.
Yeah. He ends up not hearing everything and then thinks it's
The
his
only
fault.
the only part of that she actually said out loud is, "I won't forgive you for this ever."
Yeah. So he's ending up describing all of this.
So
Toru.
he thinks that she saw him and basically said, "I won't ever forgive you for letting me die," basically, and thinks that it's his fault why she's dead. He's taken
Mhm.
on the guilt of her dying, along with the guilt of his mother dying. And that's why he had that nightmare in one of those episodes. He had the nightmare of the two mothers dying and blaming him,
Mhm.
because that's the
Right.
guilt he feels. That's the responsibility he's taken on for himself. And when Toru finally says, "I really don't think that that's what my mother meant to say, or I don't think she meant those words, but even if she did, I'd have to go against her because I love you." And then Kyo hit her with the punch, the verbal punch. He said, "I'm
I'm just
disappointed in."
disappointed.
He said, "I'm disappointed in you," and then turned and left.
Yeah, so what ends up happening is Kyo runs away,
So
Yuki runs after him. Nobody's left to protect Toru because lo and behold, up a hill comes Akito with the knife. She starts stabbing her.
talking about
And then
how talking about how Toru has robbed her of everything and everyone that meant anything to her, and and that she must feel so wonderful for stealing everything, and
and
how
she
much
doesn't.
she hates Toru. She doesn't really hate Toru. She's just jealous that Toru has managed to form bonds with everyone who was supposed to have a bond to her.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's amazing to think that Toru's reaction to being rejected and being stabbed and then being told you're worthless and I hate you and I vilify you is to say, I still want to be your friend.
She
I would
literally,
like to be your friend.
yeah,
It's just
she turned it right
how?
around on Akito, and she's like, I see you. I finally found the real you. I want to be friends."
Mhm.
She still
And
turned
to
it
think,
around.
yeah, and that brings to mind the going back to season one, and this was something I specifically wanted to talk about was the story of the idiotic traveler. Um,
Oh yeah,
this is
we
something
can't leave that
Momiji,
out.
yeah, Momiji brings this up because everybody else in his class is dealing with a story, and they think it's funny and dumb
Well, he's
that
also telling this story as kind of a lesson to Kyo,
mhm,
because at the time he had shown up. It was White Day. It was going to be White Day, and he, as a present, he wanted to take Toru away on a spa trip. And
mhm,
he invited Kyo and Yuki to go too. But Kyo, in his typical "I hate the rat" fashion, is like, "I'm not going if he's going." But Momiji knows that it wouldn't be as enjoyable for Toru if Kyo wasn't
mhm,
there too.
yeah,
So Momiji sits down and tells this story of the idiotic traveler. And basically, the story is about this traveler who is very happy in life. They go out traveling, and with every new person they meet, they're swindled out of something, whether it be money or possessions, like anything that this traveler has on them. If they think it's going to help someone, she's happy to give it away. So eventually, she gives away all her money. She gives away all her clothes, her shoes, everything, until she's completely naked. And then she starts walking through the woods because she's embarrassed to be seen with no clothes. And the demons in the woods all start tricking her out of body parts at that point. One of them gets her arm, one of them gets her leg, one of them, until she's down to nothing but her head. And as the last demon walks off with her eyes, um, they leave her. He hands her a slip of paper and says, "Here's a gift for you." And it's a slip of paper that says "idiot" on it. And she's so overjoyed. She's like, Thank you. I'll treasure this forever because this is the first time someone's actually given her something. She's like,
Mm.
thank you for this wonderful gift. This is the first gift anyone's ever bothered to give her. And then she died happy because she had finally been given a gift. And what Momiji took from that, not that he didn't think she was idiotic. He thought that she was basically a good person who put everyone else's needs ahead of her own and would give away anything that she had if it made that person's life easier. Like if that person really needed something, she would happily give away everything to help that person. And he basically said that that person is like Toru.
Mm.
Toru is doing everything she can to make all of them happy. In a lot of times, she's ignoring her own happiness to make them happy. And she's doing it all selflessly. She's not asking for anything in return. And that made Kyo think. And finally, he went on the spa trip because he realized that it was something that he could give Toru.
Yeah,
And
there
sure
are
enough,
other.
her reaction to him saying he's going on the trip, she basically said, "This is a wonderful present. Thank you."
Yeah, wasn't there an episode where it's like they go to the banquet, but then they realize that Toru would do it alone, and they're just like, "Oh shit, we shouldn't do this. We should be with her," and they actually do that.
Uh-huh.
So it ends up. I don't even know if that's before or after the idiotic traveler thing
Both
shows
after.
up, but it's okay because they do the same thing. They're just like, we are taking advantage of her, and she doesn't complain, or I don't think they ever do take advantage of her. It's
No, they
more
really
that like,
don't. She doesn't
yeah,
ask for anything.
no, but it does come into reason. It's just like, you know,
You know,
she's valuable.
we've talked about all the really heavy drama stuff. We haven't touched on any of the comedy.
Yeah, the play. We'll bounce to the
Oh,
play.
oh my
Um,
God, I love the play. It's so funny.
so late in season 2, they do a culture festival because it's Japan, it's
Well,
high school, it's anime, it's got to have a culture festival.
they did the culture festival in the first season too. It's just that their class sold rice balls instead of doing a play.
Oh yeah, but
That was how
in the
she met
second,
Momiji.
oh yeah, in the second season they make a play and they're going to do Cinderella, but the casting is all completely messed
Yeah,
up.
the casting was like all wrong.
Kyo is the prince.
They cast Toru
Um,
as an evil stepsister.
and they even make a joke out of the fact that she couldn't say boo to a goose and it can't. I was kind of expecting, like, because Laura Bailey is Toru with a dub, and I was expecting her to just do the lust voice and it being a joke of, oh my God, she turned into an evil bitch and it was funny. No, they just said, no, Toru is going to be Toru regardless of how
Uh
she's
huh.
cast. So it ends up, the cast is just all wrong. Like, Yuki is the fairy godmother, you know, and they end up creating what is known as Cinderella-ish, where Hanajima is Cinderella, and she keeps talking. I just want meat. I want meat. I don't care. I don't want to be. I don't want to be around this prince. You know, it's kind of like the Final Fantasy VII play where you just make up shit and they go around it and it becomes a big joke. The idea is she's just playing stupid, the goth chick, you know, because that's what Hanajima is. She's the goth chick, and she's just calling everybody a putz, or it's really dumb, and the crowd
Oh
is
my
just
god.
laughing.
And I totally loved when Uo, um, Toru calls her friends Hana and Uo. Uo-chan, Hana-chan. And I love when Uo sat there and she's like, "No wonder you're still a virgin."
um, yeah, the
Everyone
play
in the
ends up.
audience is like, "Holy, can she say that?"
What is going on here?
And then Kyo's like,
And
"Oh my god!" Kyo's response to that was, "Don't you have a shred of dignity? I mean, Jesus, go to the store and buy some."
Yeah, because they're trying to do the, well, Cinderella has the slipper, or Cinderella, can you have this dance? And the prince is
Hmm.
just like, no, I don't want to dance with her. Go
And then,
away.
oh my God, when he turned down Toru for the dance and she just went off and looked like she was gonna
Yeah,
cry, he tried to call her
yeah,
back.
because it ended up like art imitating life, and it's like, uh-oh.
Yep, he stuck his foot in that
um,
one.
yes, because they keep doing this thing. It's like
Oh
Cinderella
God.
does not want the dance, and the narrator or the MC the whole time is like, but we didn't do this part of the script. But whatever, we'll do it anyway. The prince is supposed to be with the princess, and then Kyo is just like, no, but it's meant to be. He's like, no, I don't give a shit. Stop it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you see this thing like,
Oh God, and they rewrote it got to the point where they were trying to do rehearsals, and they realized how bad of a train wreck their play was going to be because
and it
Toru couldn't be
was,
mean,
yes.
and Kyo wasn't even there for rehearsals, and Hanajima was like the most unaffected Cinderella ever.
I just want Yakiniku or something,
Yeah,
or
she was like, I just want yakiniku.
yeah.
And
And she would always just be in this deadpan yakiniku.
in fact, she was sitting there having sipping tea when she was supposed to be doing her Cinderella chores.
It's like, here's my slipper, bitch. Go.
I know, I loved that. And then she sat there, oh my God. And then, you know, during the whole course of the show, also, in addition to this play, you have Yuki's older brother, Ayame, shows up and he wants to actually have a relationship with Yuki because they're
Mm,
so far apart in age that while Yuki was growing up, Ayame kind of like didn't really register that Yuki existed.
yeah, he just didn't even like. I think Yuki tried to grab him and just say, "Please get me out of here, or
And he
please
was
be
just
my friend."
indifferent.
Yeah, he just said no.
When Yuki really needed him, he didn't help. And he feels
No.
terrible about it.
Yeah. Because IMA is usually played for laughter, but there
Hmm.
were times where he wasn't,
And
and it
he's
did help.
relevant to the play because Ayame's job is that he runs a boutique. He
Mm.
runs a very particular boutique that caters to men's fantasies.
Maids and nurses, oh my.
Uh huh. Maids and nurses and goth girls. Oh my.
Kanajima's favorite.
Uh huh.
Um,
So he makes all the
um,
costumes for the play.
Hanajima's is just all black because of course it is.
She asked for it to be all black.
It's just like, is this what Cinderella's supposed to
And
wear?
then
No,
Mine,
go with it.
oh my God, his assistant Mine was like, oh, interesting.
She she enables them too. That's the
He
thing.
really does. I love Mine.
Um, oh, I'm trying to think of the other funny parts. I forget. Um, oh yeah, I remember. Speaking of Hanajima, it was the episode where the dork fan club comes by and they're trying to, because apparently Motoko is having these nightmares about going
All
to
three of them are
Hanajima's
having
house.
nightmares.
Yeah, because they think it's like Castlevania or some shit, and it's just a normal house in a neighborhood somewhere, and they go in, and they're trying to find stuff like a skulls or potions or just some weird macabre shit because they think that's what Hanajima's into, and then
They basically
they end
kind
up,
of treated it like it was a PG by Black.
yeah, and
Don't judge me if
mm,
any of you know what that is.
I know it, I've never seen it,
Don't judge me. I've
but
seen it.
is it any good?
We're going to have a little talk on that later.
I don't know whether this is a good thing or a bad thing that I brought up. Anyway, but Megami is hiding in the closet because he's, just probably having fun with this whole thing. Because apparently he can cause curses or supposedly cause curses. And he figures out their names because they're just blurting it out. And one of the running gags is, oh, let's just have some tea. It's great. But Hanajima just stares at Megami and she's like, okay, you can curse them now. And it's like, he goes, oh, Motoko, and then they just run out. And it's just like, yeah, they're gone. That's good. It's just, it's such like a nothing episode, but because it's like Hanajima only gets like 2 or 3 episodes, other than the play,
It's
you know,
that
because she
episode.
has her.
That episode, the I never back down from a wave fight. That's what that one was called.
Mm,
And then
yeah, because
the next one talks about how she came to meet Toru and Uo.
and I do appreciate that they weren't just side characters. Like they spent a couple episodes and other relationships. Like they
I
end
love
up.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. So everybody in the show, outside of like a couple of the student council people set in the second season, like outside of Kimi, who shows up and is like, "Oh, I'm just here because I'm Kimi. Hello, I'm just having fun."
And she
You know,
talks about herself in the third person all the time.
I know it's annoying, but it's like everybody has a point,
Mm-hmm.
and they give them time to breathe, and like a lot of that student council stuff ends up mattering because that's where like Yuki ends up explaining stuff like
Uh-huh.
his relationship with Toru or why he's been like didn't they spend like an episode like all he's doing is like chatting with his friend and the friend is like dude you got problems but it's like all
His
right it's fine we're
his vice president of the student council is um this very um loud boy named Manabe.
isn't Machi his sister.
Machi is his half sister.
Okay, because I knew there was a relationship there, and he actually plays into it because it's at that point where they have Yuki going towards Machi, and again they build
Yuki
that up very properly.
Yuki meets Machi the first day that he also meets Manabe.
Mhm.
Manabe doesn't want to like he joins the student council I think so that he could slack off and just take naps in the student council room.
Like you do.
Uh-huh.
Not that I'd
I
know.
don't know why she joined because her mother is basically you have to be perfect in everything you do.
Another bitch. We didn't even mention her mother yet.
God.
Like every mother,
There's
other
so
than
much
Kyoko's,
her mother put so much BS pressure on her to be perfect that she literally her tick is that if there's something that's arranged absolutely perfectly, she has to mess it up. If something's too perfect, she has to make it a mess her so that she can feel centered.
I love it how Yuki sees that. And like one thing aside, Kimi gives Machi this set of chalk, and she's just kind of like pulsing for a second. She's like a little bit, and Yuki just without skipping a beat, he just takes a piece of chalk, breaks it, and so like goes on with his business. He's just like, crisis averted.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, so like Machi is I think wasn't the tagline of the entire spiel like you're supposedly perfect but you're not perfect and then her mother goes and says like when she's like 15 or something is like you're still a failure
Mm-hmm.
and it's just like but I did everything you asked me to and it's like I guess I was a failure too but I guess I'm a failure for raising such a failure of a kid. I'm like this woman wouldn't even take accountability for having caused the situation. It's just, ugh.
Yeah.
But but in the end, it's like Machi and Yuki slowly, find a common ground, and you get these like little instances where Machi's calling him, and she's like, "Well, what are you calling me?" It's just like I don't know. I just wanted to, but not in like a condescending way. It's just like I don't know why I called you. I just did. And then Manabe just being an idiot is just like sitting in the room, like they were together in the room, and they were probably gonna make out or kiss or something. And Manabe's phone goes off, and he's like, "Damn it, my phone came off." Because that he was intentionally trying to just get them to probably, 'cause he's not dumb. But again, it's like
Well,
you need those like points of levity, because you're building these bonds. Because the
touching
show
on
is all.
touching on what you said about how Yuki ends up confessing about his feelings for Toru. Yuki actually admits to Manabe that that he feels more like a like he would towards a mother towards Toru.
Mhm.
Toru is kind of taking on the substitute mom role for him.
Yeah.
She gives him attention, encouragement, and unconditional love and
Yeah, and it
support.
doesn't force him down a certain path and think
She
everything is
never
made for him.
and she's never disappointed in anything he does or says. She's uncommonly supportive.
It's
Any
almost like
decision
Toru's
that
a saint.
Toru is a saint. What are you talking about?
I know, it's
She is
uncanny.
such a
Uh,
good person. She is just so uncommonly good. She
mm,
always knows the right thing to say to whoever she's talking to.
mm.
She's got so much empathy for the people around her. She always knows exactly what to say to make them feel better.
Another thing I'm remembering now that I'm thinking about it was the idiot fan club and how Motoko and do all that time. And then I remember telling you this while we were watching it, like 4 or 5 episodes before the show ends. She gets actually no, it's like late into season 2 or early into season 3 where she like breaks down and just kind of confides in him and is like, you see me as a real person and I see you as a person and I kind of like you, but she doesn't act on it. But then the talk at graduation is like, I hope you find somebody that really loves you and respects you, and I'm glad to have met you. And I'm like, where were you 40 episodes ago when
Right?
you were in the stupid Yuki fan club? I was just, oh,
All it
this
took,
girl was there
like,
the whole time.
what really gets me is the fan club. They have decided to do this thing that a lot of fan clubs do, and I think it's absolutely ridiculous. I almost said a really
You were about to
nasty
say it.
word. I almost said a
Yeah, I'm
really
glad you
nasty word
caught
and I
that.
caught it. I'm sorry.
Uh, uh,
Um, but
hey, we will not be demonetized, even though we don't make money for this. But still,
oh, so
um,
my saying absolutely wasn't bad enough.
no, no, we can say that. I'm just like,
Okay,
you know,
no. My point was they they do what a lot of fan clubs do, and they dehumanize the person they're idolizing.
mhm.
Like he's not a person to them; he's a possession.
Yeah. Did they even meet him? That's
None
the
of
thing. It was
them.
like they
Like
were
it's
talking.
against their rules. No, if you address him, you have to address him by a certain way, depending on what year in school you are.
Prince Yuki or
You're not
something.
allowed to
There's
take his. You're not allowed to touch his possessions. You're not allowed to touch him.
ugh.
It's and basic interaction is not allowed
Oh,
beyond hello.
oh.
Like they literally put him on a pedestal, and it's like you have to worship him as a prince god, whatever, but you're not
Mhm.
allowed to actually form any kind of relationship with him.
Yeah, and then there was a similar situation with Uotani when stops becoming a she stops becoming a gangster and starts trying to go
She
straight.
actually went straight before the show started.
Yeah.
That's
And
Kyo
weren't like a
that
couple of her friends like I think they were out shopping or something dumb, and these 3 girls are following them around thinking, "Who's this Uotani? She's not who she used to be. This is dumb." They're because I think they're trying to be like fake gangsters, but then all
okay.
of a sudden
They're
they
trying
pull a fan
to
club.
Yeah, they're trying to become gangsters, and they figure that the best way to do that is to
That's
take
so
down
dumb.
the one that they've heard the most about, which happens to be Uotani. They
And
figure
it
that
does
they're going to
not.
make a name for themselves by beating her. And
I
she turns it around and tells them the story about how she met Toru and Kyoko.
I forget. There was the episode, I think it was at the end of an episode or like right at the beginning where those people are staring at the camera and they're making these taunts to the cameras almost to psych themselves out. It's like, you're a motherfucker, fuckers, fucker, you,
It was
which
at
is
the
just,
end. It was at the end that they were trying to channel the energy they needed. And then they
yeah.
ended
And
up
then one
like
of them,
the attitude, they get the right attitude, and then Momiji comes up to them, starts talking in German, and they freak out and run away.
uh,
It's so funny. That's
I'm
how
trying to remember, was
Momiji
it?
that's how Momiji psychs people out. Like the very first time that he ever met Toru, Toru was at her part-time job in his father's office building. And he came up to her and started speaking in German, and she was really confused.
I mean, I would
The
be.
only thing she could think of is, what a cute little boy.
Why is he speaking this foreign language? I don't get
And
it.
she just got so confused about him speaking in German. I don't even think he realized, like, I don't think he realized she couldn't understand him. But
Uh,
anyway, he did the basic Momiji thing. He pranked the hell out of her by speaking to her in German at first. And then he got wind of the school's cultural festival because she rushed to go home and dropped a flyer.
mm.
And that's how he got wind of it. So that's why he and
And then he ends
Hattori
up
showed
joining the
up.
school.
And then he decided he wanted to go to that school. And Hatsuharu decided that he was going to go too.
Mm.
So he and Momiji transferred to their school for the next school year. And which they announced at the end of the spa trip, the hot springs trip. Oh God, did we talk about that yet?
In passing, I think it was
Oh
something
my
you definitely wanted to talk about
oh my goodness,
because we were doing the idiotic traveler. I think.
the trip to the hot spring was so funny. Like if you want hilarious, the hot spring itself is run by this lady who's got health problems, and
Oh God.
her son is the monkey Ritsu. We haven't even talked about him either.
Yeah, because he just screams all the time, and she screams all the time. I think it was meant to be funny, but I just hated it.
Basically,
I will
she and her husband took
readily
on
admit
this
it's just
she and her husband took on this attitude of, we gave birth to a zodiac. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Like they kept constantly apologizing for his existence. And he took it to mean that he was supposed to apologize for
whatever
existing.
sucks.
Like they turned him into what he is. He constantly apologizes and freaks
Anyway,
out over the littlest of things. Uh-oh.
go on. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm fine. We're
he
talking about Ritsu.
He's constantly apologizing for every little thing he does, even for existing, because his parents have been doing it his whole life. And he thinks that his existence is mistake. He even
Yeah,
sits there and
because it's like
finally, like,
she shows.
just going to Shigure's house to meet Toru, he all he wants is to hopefully make a friend, and he spills coffee all over um some of the pages that Shigure was turning into his editor, Mitsuru. And
Oh God,
he,
Mitsuru was great.
I love her. She puts up with so much. She's exactly like Ritsu
Um,
too.
yeah, but
So,
again, I
but
think for me, what it was.
getting back to what I was saying, he freaks out so much over
Oh yeah,
such a tiny little mistake. He literally goes up onto the roof and starts talking about jumping off.
yeah, that was a bit excessive.
Toru literally had to climb up on the roof and talk him down. And everybody's
I'm
sitting
shocked
there
they
like,
didn't pull it.
everybody's like, how when did she get up there? How the hell?
I'm kind of shocked the show didn't have her slip off because it seemed like such a
Oh,
cliche thing that would happen.
She almost
I
did,
know. Um,
but
but yeah, so
seriously,
it's like,
she talked him back down and told, she's like, he said that I have the audacity to keep living, and she's like, do it, keep living.
ew,
Find that
Jesus.
purpose. Find your purpose for living. She
Yeah.
showed him that it's okay to not know what you want to do right away. It's okay to
Mhm.
take the time to figure out what you want to do and who you want to be.
Yeah, because the running gag was the owner of the spa would always like scream everything.
Uh-huh.
And then you find Ritsu like an episode or two later, and he keeps going, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." And just this like exaggerated, like Ugh, stop it,
Oh my god.
God.
And
You know, and
when she meets him at first, she thinks he's a girl because he's got this long, pretty blonde hair and
I thought Ayame was a girl too.
he is wearing this pretty kimono and everything, and he's he looks like a girl. Even
I'm sitting here
Ritsu,
just
even Mitsuru thought he was a girl because
it
she's
is kind of
asking him for makeup tips and how to properly and to teach her how to properly put on a kimono. And he offered to do all of that for her anyway. Mitsuru, I think, besides Toru, was the first friend he ever made.
yeah.
And
Mitsuru was Shigure's editor, and every so often she would stop by and she would just scream at Shigure every time because
sh-
Shigure would always be like, I'm out shopping or I'm out
whenever he
with
had a
Akito.
deadline, whenever he had a deadline that she'd be by to pick
You're
up his
always supposed to have a
pages,
deadline, right? You idiot.
whenever he was supposed to be turning in excuse me, whenever he was supposed to be turning in pages to her for his book, he would constantly skip out. He'd either hide in a room and pretend to not be home, or he'd be
I'm
out at
starting
the
to
or he'd be on vacation or something. Like he did it to torture her.
I was starting to wonder if he actually was a writer or if he was actually just
Oh no,
pretending
he
half the
actually
time.
was a writer. That trashy romance novel that they kept reading throughout the episodes. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
They showed Hana reading it
Oh,
instead of the marathon for the school.
mm.
That
Oh
track
yeah.
that track day, she's sitting there literally reading his book. And then while they're at on their beach, the lake house vacation,
Mm.
they're at the lake house for a couple of days, and Hattori's reading it. Oh my god, I totally loved that. And he's like, "You like it, right?" And Hattori's reaction was, "It's revolting."
Speaking of
I loved
pottery, I'm
that.
reminded. Another thing I remember was Kana remarries and
Uh huh.
Hattori's left kind of like stuck. He doesn't want to meet anybody. He doesn't want to do anything. But then the teacher of Toru's class, who we've been seeing over and over and over. So like they're not doing anything with her other than being a teacher, but she's getting like lines and shit. So she ends up being somewhat important.
Well,
They
she
give her like
also
mid-season, yeah, mid-season two, they finally give her something to do. We find out that Shigure slept with her or
he
tried to date her.
no, he didn't sleep with her. That was the one thing that
Oh
they
yeah,
didn't do. They
right.
pretended to
It was a
be they pretended to be
right,
dating for a while.
and it was a failure.
It was
Um,
a total failure.
but then I think she ends up confessing to Hattori under the assumption that like he is not single or whatever, or that he found a different girlfriend because Shigure, again being Shigure, is playing her like a fiddle, just for shits and giggles. And I was just laughing because her breakdown is like so pathetic and yet so funny at the same time. She's like starts bawling, and Hattori's like, What am I doing here? What's wrong?" And it's like they end up getting together as well, and it's just like they don't do a lot of scenes together, but it's just like this
Well,
nothing teacher character suddenly gets an arc, and it's just they don't leave anything to chance. I've been saying that again and again, but I'm just
first,
like it's so good.
it's not exactly like she's a nothing character. She was tied to them because she met them through Kana. Kana was
Oh,
her best
that's what it
friend in
was.
college.
Oh
So
yeah, that's what it
during the
was.
whole time when Kana and Hattori were dating, she was part of the group. She would hang out with them because it would always be Hattori, Ayame, and Shigure. The three of them
Mm.
together. That's why they called themselves the Three Musketeers. They were always
And
together.
didn't
And
Hattori say it was such a stupid name?
no, that was Yuki and Kyo.
Oh, oh,
but um but the three of them were always together, so of course if one of them is dating, their girlfriend is going to be a part of the group. And um so Kana hung around with them, and then because Kana had a best friend, her name Mayu, that teacher, she ended up hanging around with them too. But she had a crush on Hattori. And Shigure picked up on that and was like,
Mm-hmm.
you're lonely, I'm lonely, we could be lonely together. Think about it.
In the way only
So,
Shigure could do.
yeah, so of course,
Oh,
she
dead end
agrees to
relationship alert.
she agrees to be his girlfriend for a while, and then finally she breaks up with him because she'd rather be by herself than be lonely in a room with him.
Ugh.
Literally, all the
Um,
two of them did was just sit there and just do nothing.
Nothing.
He'd
Yeah.
sit and read a book, and she'd be like, "Are we ever gonna do anything?"
Yeah. I'm trying to think. Was there I'm trying to remember. Was there any other? Because I'm trying to blank. We talked so much of things. Was there anything else? I think we got sidetracked. Was there anything else about the spa trip that you wanted to bring up?
Um,
Because we got to talking about Ritsu, I think, and then it just
I think
went
it's
from there.
from okay. The spa trip had a really good purpose.
Yeah,
It was the
because there was
first
idiotic
time.
traveler.
What the spa trip was the first time that Yuki let his guard down and actually laughed in front of someone
Oh yeah,
because
didn't.
Toru went to go hit a ping pong ball and missed completely. She
Uh,
missed, and it was the funniest fucking thing. And
I saw a similar thing with Spy
Yuki
Family. Anya tries to throw a dodgeball and it just goes like 2 feet.
Yuki
Right.
completely left the room and Toru went after him and she
Did she
thought he
say
was
something like,
upset. She thought he was upset or something and all of a sudden you see cuz his shoulders are quaking and he looks like he's crying. But then he just cracks up and you can hear the laughter before you see his face and he was just like that was the most pathetic thing I've ever seen. And she's like
I forget.
she was just like you could have laughed in front of me. I wouldn't have cared. And he said, "Yeah, but
Uh,
I've never even laughed in front of my parents." Like, that shows you just how repressed he's been.
yeah,
He's never even felt free enough to laugh in front of his family.
yeah.
And he sure as hell wasn't about to laugh in front of Kyo.
Um,
But
other thing I was the only other thing I would bring up, I would remember because we haven't talked about Kagura much, was the fact that every time she speaks or every time she says anything, she
it's,
breaks somebody's house.
oh god, yeah. Kagura's emotions are very extreme. She
Um,
can be really quiet and cutesy, though.
mhm,
It's just then her emotions swell up and then something gets broken.
mhm.
Usually it's one of Kyo's bones or something. I'm exaggerating. She likes to pick him up and throw him around though like he's a rag doll. She threw him
Um,
into Shigure's TV. She
Ow.
regularly throws him through doors.
Yeah. She
She
breaks everybody's house
she
somehow.
she somehow managed to tackle him through a floor and onto a table full of food that she had cooked. She literally cooked everything in the refrigerator into this gigantic feast and then went to
Mm,
go get Kyo to eat and managed to tackle him through the floor and through that table.
yeah. And then Toru, in her infinite kindness, it was just like, well, let's just go buy more stuff and be friends. I was just like,
And
girl cannot
like
be any nicer.
Kagura at first was trying to see Toru as a rival or whatever, but
Mm,
when she finally admitted to herself that her reasons she finally did admit that the only reason that she latched onto Kyo so hard was because she was doing the same thing that all of the other zodiacs did in some form or another. If I
mm,
can be nice to him, then I'm not a monster.
yeah.
Or like even Shigure at some point he very coldly said to Toru, he was trying to push home exactly the point that he's not as likable as she likes to give him credit for being. He literally
Yeah.
tells her at one point that all of the zodiacs, no matter how cursed they are, the one thing that they all have in common is that they're like, at least we're not the cat.
Ugh.
The cat is the like the cat is the dumpster of all the negativity.
Mm,
Everything that they think about themselves that's monstrous or whatever, it's all summed up in the form of the cat. They hold the
mm,
cat to be even worse than they are. And they're like
mm,
all of them are just like, at least we're not the cat. Like, as bad as our
yeah.
lives are, we don't have it nearly as bad as he does.
Hmm. And
And
yet, Toru. Oh, go ahead.
that's exactly one of the reasons why Toru is so patient with him. She understands that there's a person in there just waiting for someone to
Hmm.
finally see him for who and what he is and love him and accept him anyway. And she does that
Yeah.
for him. She accepts him in a way that no one has ever accepted him. Not even the
Hmm.
guy who wants to be his dad. Like, she's
Yeah.
literally she she gave him so much love and understanding and acceptance that he couldn't help but love her back. Like, he
Um.
just could not resist loving her.
Yeah.
Nobody can resist loving Toru. She's too good for
Right.
everybody.
Even Akito, like the crux of the
Right?
show is
Even
Akito
Akito,
finally being friends.
it took
You know,
literally 5 minutes for Akito to go from "I hate you" to reaching
like
out to
what have
try to
I
be her
done?
friend. Yeah, she was literally
Yeah.
just like, "Oh my God, what have I done?" And as
Yeah. And
soon
then
as
the.
and what happens to Toru, literally, she's standing there in the rain with Akito having two huge gashes on her arm from this knife that Akito had been holding. And she's still
Mm,
like, let's be friends. And she's reaching her arm out. And Akito's reaching out to take her hand. And the cliff falls right out from under Toru's feet. And she's like
still.
left half dead in the rain.
Mm.
And to her credit, Akito freaked out and ran for help right away.
Right, and it's at that point where Akito finally starts changing, and the epilogue episodes kind of hit, and we do the God episode about the cat and
Uh
all of
huh.
the little interweaving stories. And I did want to bring the one because it was like the episode before the ending with Toru and Kyo, specifically the one with Akito and Shigure. And you knew I was gonna bring this up, and it's the weirdest fucking thing I ever saw, even for this show, as fucked up as it was. I think both of us, and then there was like somebody else with us. Akito was talking about Shigure and what she meant. The way she describes wanting to be with him is some
Oh,
super like Doki Doki Literature Club weird shit. And I was just,
she was
what
talking
the
about wanting to invade every part of him. Like I compared it to like a
I
disease.
I
She
was
was
just
like,
like,
I want to be all up in your bones and in your marrow and your blood.
I
And I'm
want
like,
to feel my scent or
um,
just smell my scent. I was just like, what is this?
I'm like,
You turn. It's like I would have expected Akito to do that 5 episodes ago.
okay, so what I was actually going to hit
But
at was something a little
oh,
different.
oh god.
I was
Well,
going to
good because I don't want to end on
what
that
led
note.
up to what led up to Akito's little psychotic break there with the knife. Momiji's curse lifted.
Oh yeah, that was
Momiji's
intense.
curse
Oh.
lifted, and she ran to him right away and begged him to stay with her and not to leave her. And he said, I'll need some time to think about that. And the next day, he came to her and said, I won't promise that. I want to do something with my life. I want to go out and actually have a life. I'm not going to stay here with you. That's what sent her spiraling.
Yeah.
Because she could feel it one by one. Like, first Momiji's curse broke, and then Hiro's curse broke. And she could feel it. The curses were starting to lift. Hiro's
Mm,
curse broke, and then Ayame's curse broke. She could feel them breaking one by one. And
mm,
finally, that's why she stabbed Kurino, because Kurino actually did stay when she begged for it. It's not what she needed. When she begged him not to leave her, he should have been the first one to leave. He was
Mm,
the first one whose curse broke, and what he did was he enabled her behavior. He didn't
yeah,
help her grow a backbone and learn how to live with it. So
yeah, and
so he didn't do her any favors by sticking around the way he did.
no, and it's weird how those final episodes work because a lot of it is that intensity because we spend a little bit of time doing the funny haha stuff and then you get into the bonds breaking and then you realize it's just like after a while it's just like okay, we can let go.
That
Those
curse
last
was,
couple of episodes are just letting go of all
yeah,
that hatred.
that curse and all of the emotional baggage that came with it is what was holding that inner circle together. And they were ready to, all of the spirits were ready to move on and not be bound together anymore. They finally understood what the cat meant way back when. They finally understood about not needing eternity. They were ready to go on and move on to other things and be happy, knowing that they had all been such good friends and that they would always have that, even if they weren't physically together. And that's why, that's why they have this scene, like maybe through a couple of episodes from the final one, where Akito comes out in this really pretty kimono that Shigure gives her. And she's dressed up and lets everybody see that she's actually a she, not a he, as they've all been raised to think. Because she's letting go of that side of herself. She's letting go of the man that her mother insisted she be raised as, and she's embracing her new life as a woman because she is a woman. She's being true to herself finally. And she tells everyone who's still everyone whose curse has not broken yet, she tells them that she's setting them all free. They're no longer going to be bound to her. For a lot of them, their curses lift right away because
Mm.
she's setting them free. For anyone who is still cursed at that moment, like their curses all start lifting too. And like there were, I think it was Kisa, her curse hadn't broken yet. Kisa and um I don't remember who else. I think I don't remember if I think Kisa was the last one whose curse actually broke.
Yeah, because I think Hero broke earlier, but
Heroes
then like
broke
right,
after Heroes broke sometime around the same time as IMA and Momiji.
yeah,
And then Haru and Isuzu, their curses broke together. Kagura, her Kagura and Kisa, their curses finally lifted around the same time. And um Kagura realized when she overheard she overheard Toru describe how she felt about Kyo. And the only thing that she had to say was, "You're so stupid. Why aren't you telling him that? Kyo needs to
yeah.
hear how you feel." Like,
Why are you telling Isuzu or why are you telling me? Why aren't you telling Kyo this?
yeah, that's why Toru finally comes clean and tells Kyo how she feels. And then the next thing you know, she's falling off a cliff and having to go to the hospital. And Kyo finally admits to himself that he loves her too much to stay away from her.
Mm.
That he has to have her in his life. Otherwise, he has no chance to really be happy. Be-
And then it turns out that
and
they
then
end up together.
yeah, and it's the sweetest thing ever.
I still
So
remember your reaction to
cute.
seeing the grandkid. It's just like
Oh, their granddaughter is the cutest little thing.
I love that their parents don't even get. They're just her mother, her father. I'm like, they're the dad and the mother, and it's like they just go right to and then they go to a second generation. It's like,
And
wow, that one.
that was Toru and Kyo's son and his wife and daughter.
Mm,
So they have a boy. And you can see on her little shelf of knickknacks and things, you can see her little zodiac set. She actually made a cat. She went out and got some clay and made a cat to complete the set for herself. Right
yeah,
there
I love one of those.
with a picture
What
of
was
her
one of the?
mom and a little bowl of his charm bracelet beads.
It's one of the last lines was funny. It's like they're always lovey dovey. It's like, um,
Uh-huh.
but again, it's amazing. We've been talking so long about this, but there's just so much that's been going on, and I don't even know if it's everything. But
Uh well,
but
we haven't even touched on there's the sequel yet or the prequel.
yeah, because didn't you say there was a something like called Fruits Basket? Another, I think they said they
Uh-huh.
were making it, but it's not
They've made it, but
complete.
it's not I don't know if they've actually made it. I know that they were if they have made it, it's still in Japanese. That they're
Okay, so
um it's not I don't know if they've animated it. I know that
mm,
it's a manga. I don't know if any of it's been animated yet.
makes
But
sense.
they have a prequel movie that's out in Japan right now called
Mm.
The Fruits Basket Prelude, and it's the story of Katsuya and Kyoko getting together and having Toru.
Oh, that'd be interesting.
And one of the scenes that I've seen a clip of from the prelude is this adorable scene of Toru and Kyo. It's so cute. It's they're coming home from work or whatever. She's been out. He's coming home from the dojo because his job he at the end of Fruits Basket he decides to move away to another town with that has a dojo he can train in because he wants to learn the dojo business so he can take over his dad's dojo when
Mm.
Kazuma his dad well his second dad
Adopted, yeah.
his adopted dad the one that he wants to be a dad
What's up
excuse
with
me.
Hanajima of all people?
He's not with
Throw
her.
that out
She's
there.
just she's his assistant. They don't end up together.
Oh,
But
oh.
Uo does end up with Kurino though,
Uh,
which
makes
I
sense.
which I think is really cute. In fact, there's a scene towards the end where Akito actually is there and meets Uo and Hana,
Mm.
and she introduces herself, and she basically says that she's responsible for what happened to Kurino and that he's there in that hospital. And Uo actually hugs her and then takes off running and goes to find Kurino,
Um,
which
but
is adorable.
in, yeah, in terms of like what this show means, like I'm not gonna sit here and say it was like my favorite show, right? But I knew like even a few episodes in, this was something special,
Hmm.
and goofy comedy here and there, silly characters here and there, goofy school stuff here and there, some cliches and tropes here and there. But you think like everything we talked about, just the intensity of all these character stories and how they weave together, and it's almost like nothing's left to chance, and it's like everybody gets their time to express things, expressing bonds or getting to know other people,
Hmm.
and I was just floored by it.
Oh yeah.
And I don't think, and again, I do think a part of it was that you showed it to me. It wasn't something that I did myself, because I think if I saw this myself, I probably wouldn't have seen as much of it. or gotten as much out of it. But I think because we did it together, there was just something special and unique about seeing it play out. Um, I seeing it again. What did you think? How
Um,
different was it knowing that you were showing it to me? It's like this was you wanting to show it to me, so there was definitely something
it
in it for
was
you.
it had actually been quite a while since I watched it, so it was almost like watching it for the first time again. And it was so much fun.
Mm.
I even during all the heavy emotional stuff, I just sat there and I'd mute myself just so I could cry.
Oh, I don't blame you.
Cause
Um,
yeah, heavy emotions. But this
yeah,
show
some of it.
is it's really what makes it so special is it literally shows you all the stages of grief and the impact of trauma and how trauma can take a different form depending on what's happening
Yes, but it also
and
shows
how
hope
you
in that
can
too.
and that there's always a reason to hope no matter how bleak everything is there's always something to hope for.
There's always a Toru out there. Just wait for it.
God, we all need a Toru.
Uh, but yeah, like I said, I don't know. Again, I don't know if there is another show like this. I'm sure there is, but it's just this uniqueness to it that, again, I don't think I would have expressed it the same way. I did not expect it to
Well,
be.
I don't think there's going to be anything quite like Fruits Basket, but there
Yeah,
are
and that's
other
because
really cute things out there.
yeah, but I remember like a joke. I think I told you like one of my friends was like, "What are you getting an inspiration from a romantic show, like a romantic goofy comedy from?" I was like, "This is not a goofy romantic comedy. No,
Oh
no, no,
no,
no. Oh God, no."
no, this has the
And if any,
feels.
yeah, and I know we expressed a lot here, but if you haven't seen it, in there's only so much we could do justice from, but take it from me that there was just as much levity that was necessary because there is so much unique intensity to the scenes that I
Yeah.
think a lot of people, teenagers will get a lot out of the goofy comedy stuff, but I think a lot of us, a little older, because I think that's what resonated with me was those scenes. It's like, this
Oh,
isn't trying to be a joke. They were not trying to be just funny for the sake of being stupid or funny. There was a reason for everything.
dude,
And it's amazing.
dude. Haru breaking the haunted house.
Yeah.
Oh god,
Um,
that was so funny.
yeah. But yes, would I recommend, because I ask this every time, would I recommend Fruits Basket? Well, the fact that we spent 2.5 hours talking about it, I guess you could get to that answer pretty fucking quick. Yes, I would. Again, I'm not going to say it's like a top 10 show, but it's certainly going to fit. And I would not blame anybody if they ever said it was their favorite show.
Oh hell, a
And
month ago you couldn't say that.
no, but now I can say that and go, "Oh, okay, I can see that." Like I made a list of like the top 10 favorite shows that I've seen in like the last 10 years, right?
Hmm.
2013 onward. This was like honorable mention territory. So it'd be like right up there with some of the stuff that especially that I've seen recently, like, Apothecary or Frieren or something. I do
Hmm.
not take that lightly. I am very hard to impress. Um so I do not regret seeing this at all.
Oh, and
What was
before we get into the ending wrap up stuff, we mentioned what Fruits Basket Another is without explaining what it is.
right?
Fruits Basket Another is a sequel set that was written by the same person who wrote and illustrated Fruits Basket. It's literally a
Mhm.
continuation of the Soma family, but it's the next generation of Somas. It's um, Toru and Kyo's son and Yuki and Machi's children. It's the next generation of Somas, and they meet this orphan girl who is kind of an outcast. And it's about how they react with, how they meet her and how they form a friendship with her. And in this case, she's the broken one. She's the one
Oh,
that needs the help. They're the
oh,
ones helping her. Like, you could make a case that Toru was kind of broken too, but she never
right.
thought of herself that way.
No, until way late when it came into the Kyo thing. But it's like, even
Toru
then, it's like,
basically,
she's too pure.
she's been going through life wanting to make sure that she is like the idiotic traveler. She's putting everyone else above herself and making
Hmm.
sure that she can do anything possible to help make someone else's day better. Whether it's washing their clothes or cooking them dinner or cleaning their house or anything like that. While still going on, and while she was living with her grandfather, she went out and got a part time job just so she could pay her school tuition because she didn't want to be a financial burden on him. That's why she has a part time job. She's trying to pay her own way in life because she
Hmm.
doesn't want to be a financial burden on anybody.
Right, but in another, the main character is in a different sort of situation or a different scenario.
Mm-hmm. She's in a very different type of situation. And I think I'm not altogether 100% on the plot, even though I watched a video about it. I don't remember that
Mm.
much of it. Um, because I haven't read it myself. I actually don't read manga. I don't judge me.
I mean, I used to, but now I can't really
I
read anything.
I don't really. I mean, I could, but I just don't have time to read anything anymore.
We are scrub lords. Oh no!
Perish the thought.
I know. We spent 2 hours talking about anime and loving it, and here we are. Not much. It's whatever.
Yeah,
It,
it's
it is what it is.
uh-huh.
Um, Anime is great.
So yeah, it's
Um,
the whole next generation of summons. And
yeah.
it sounds like it's really good, and I really want them to make an anime of it so I can watch it.
I mean, if it's half as good as this one was, I'm
I'm
looking
not
forward
sure
to
if it
it.
is or isn't.
I don't know, but it's like it's like what's the fallback? It's like as bad as the first version. I'm like, all right, I'd still give it a chance, right?
Yeah.
But God, but yeah, it's again, there was so much that we could talk about, but I mean, we did talk about so much,
Uh-huh.
but there's only so much that you can.
What
We'd be
were
here for hours.
what were the pros and cons that you wanted to touch on?
Um, to me, I think it was, and I said this before, I think it was building to being like a love triangle. So I thought of this as like both a pro and a con, where and we did discuss it, but it was like it was building to being a standard love triangle sort of bliss, it could have just been a here's another thing. They're gonna talk about how they love each other. It's the end of the fucking show, but we gotta shoehorn it in. I've seen harem shows like that, right? And I was expecting them to go, is it gonna be Yuki? Is it gonna be Kyo? And second season hits, and they're like, no, it's gonna be Kyo, and here's why. And we're gonna do a whole different thing, and it's not even gonna be a thing. I was just like, wow, that actually took some balls to not like be a typical stupid love triangle situation because they were building to that, and then as you said, they just didn't. So I felt it was like both a pro and a con in a way because it's like,
Well, I said very early on that it was never going to be Yuki
yeah,
because Year of the Cat.
I felt that was such a weird thing. Like I think you knew it was symbolism. I felt it was just kind of a throwaway comment, until it
Okay,
wasn't.
I'm going to explain this comment. In the very, very beginning of the series, when Toru is talking about how her mother told her the story of the zodiacs, her mother told her about how in once upon a time, God invited all of the animals to a great banquet, and the rat played a prank on the cat and told him the banquet was in 2 days instead of the next day. So the next day, all of the animals in procession went to the god's palace, except for the cat. And they all proceeded to have a wonderful banquet, all except for the cat who was at home. And from then on, the god cast the cat out of the zodiac because of how angry he was that the cat had ignored his invitation. And Toru, in her cute little baby form, sat there and cried about it. And her mom's like, "Why are you crying?" And she's like, "Because I feel so bad for the cat. In fact, that settles it. From now on, I'm no longer a dog, I'm a cat." As in, she was born in the year of the dog. And she decided
Oh,
she was going to say that she was born in the year of the cat. And she calls it the Year of the Cat fan club. That's how she
oh,
finally got Kagura to be nice to her, by admitting the thing about being a fan of the cat.
okay.
She called it the Year of the Cat fan club. And that was how Kagura finally stopped seeing her as a romantic rival and as someone who just genuinely liked the cat.
Mm.
And that was someone she could get along with.
Yeah, I would think again. The only other con that I can think of is the Yuki fan club being such a presence until late
Oh,
when they finally slow down.
oh God, they were so annoying.
Um, but outside of like Kimi or some other weird characters, I think the dude who was the former student council president who had this like weird fascination with Yuki and he was sort of like a friend or a rival or it was like I just want you to like be my friend or something. It was like in the early to second season or something. It was again, it was a nitpick. Just some characters were just there to be there rather than okay being integral to the plot. And I think the show was again, I don't think the comedy was always landing.
Oh,
Um,
oh, remember the whole thing with the class president attacking Momiji for wearing a girl's uniform top?
oh yeah,
Oh my God.
that too.
And Hatsuharu jumped to Momiji's defense and said, "Just think of it. If it was Yuki wearing it, you wouldn't have any problems with it, would you?"
And
And then
nobody
he just
said
kept
no.
imagining it, and Yuki was finally like, "Stop imagining it."
And then that's the scene where Momiji turns to Toru and he goes, "Do you want the lollipop?" And I'm like,
Oh
God,
God,
I
it was
still
so
remember that.
funny.
But again, it was a minor quibble,
It
if I'm
was
being honest.
honestly the humor in that show. It was just like it was hilarious when it hit.
Yeah, and I think it has to do with the pacing, and that's the pro. That's why this version, if it was the original and it was all filler, you can bet that those scenes would take up the majority of the show and it would
Oh God,
drag.
one of the biggest
And
pros I can think of versus the original was the cheer.
oh god,
2 freaking minutes of them going on and on and on and on and on
yeah, and we
about the
talked
Prince
about it
Yuki
being
fan
poopy.
club.
Um,
Yeah. Holy
but
hell. I was just like, okay, where's my fast forward button? Click.
right, but never did I ever feel like the only time I felt like I hated this show was the Ritsu episode. I was just like,
Oh,
would
come
you shut
on.
up?
Ritsu is funny though.
I, I, ah,
Every
I think
time
it was
every time he
they were.
exploded, it's ah!
I think they overdid it. That was my problem.
Well,
Is
I
it was the
laughed.
entire
I couldn't
first
help
half.
it.
I think that was a personal preference sort of situation. I personally just couldn't stand him. But again, that's like one minor Soma character out of like a cast of like 12 great ones. So it's like, what am I complaining about too much? Um, but pros, I mean, even like someone like IMA being what he was still worked in the
Oh god.
scope of the show.
Remember how
Like,
extra IMA was? Like Yuki got hurt at one of the banquets and he's like, "Remember that summer when we promised to spend our lives or we promise to be
Mhm.
brothers forever, and Yuki's like, literally none of that happened.
Yes, like a lot of this is the big pro I think is the comedy was when it worked, it would do these like
Oh
little
god.
asides where Shigure would be seen laughing to himself on like the other half of the screen when they're like Yuki and Kyo are yelling like idiots. Shigure is just sitting there just snickering to himself, reading the paper. Mitsuru would spend time just crazy like yelling at Shigure. It's like, what are you doing talking on the phone? What are you doing out here? Who are you talking with? Why aren't you here? You know, little
Dude, she
stupid
was
shit.
so
And
extra. She hung a noose off of one of his trees.
I remember that. I was just,
She
I'm gonna
was. I mean, as extras, you sit there and pick on Ritsu for being. She is just like him.
Yeah, but and again, the thing with Hanajima and Megami having these weird curses, like it's seriously dark and stuff, and then they play it for comedy, and it kind of works. Or
Hana's got the
just
waves.
yeah, it's this thing where everything should be worse than it is because it's kind of goofy,
Basically,
but they play it.
if you want to explain Hanajima, it's kind of like extreme empathy. It's not perfect telepathy, but she can pretty much figure out what you're thinking by reading your emotions. That's
Yeah,
the
but
waves.
again, for me, it's just all of these little side things are happening on the screen. They're going to a reaction shot of somebody. And sometimes it's just Toru making some weird, exaggerated, like, or like making these weird noises, or, because they would do the exaggerated comedy thing, but it would fit because it's like, you're doing that to express something else that's going on in this scene, and like everybody's reacting to something. There's like
Yeah.
little hidden Easter eggs in the comedy, or in the even in some of the hit like darker stuff. It's like everything is just
Uh-huh.
there. Like every character just means something. And it's rare to just sit there and be like, everything has a purpose. Nothing was left to chance. And I was just like, I've not seen anything like this. It's like nothing, because it takes a lot of effort to be like, I'm going to put this here. I'm going to write this scene. I'm going to write this character saying this, or this visual is meaning this. It's like everything in this show is there for a reason. And even if I'm having issues with some of the stuff on screen, I'm like, there's always something I'm going to be looking forward to, because just a second later, Toru could say something, or Kyo or Yuki could say something, or Shigure could just be sitting there goofing off, scratching his butt or something, laughing at the camera. I'd be like, no, right back where we were. It's fine. It's good. Like, we're good now. Like, I can't find fault with this, um, because they had so much to work with,
Mm-hmm.
and I was just impressed. Was there anything that you either super liked about the show, or just was like, I really, bleh, I don't like this, and I want to talk about it? I
Honestly,
mean, other than the Yuki fan club, I think we know that.
yeah, that's I could have done without the Yuki fan club. But
Mm,
honestly, there's so much about this show to enjoy. Like all of it. The way these characters interacted with each other, the the basically the bonds that they all had as being part of the inner zodiac, all of that. They still had their own friendships and relationships and everything, and they were, like in spite of being part of a larger clan, they still loved they still loved each other as family and as friends. And they even would take, like, it got to the point where now, once they'd all started meeting Toru, they all wanted to start hanging out together because she was the one they all gravitated to.
mhm.
Akito really did get jealous of that. She was just completely jealous of the fact that Toru had taken her place in in all of their affections. And that was why she lashed out at Toru so hard. But even she ended up becoming really good friends. That was something I do remember about Fruits Basket and Other, is that Akito spends a lot of time with Toru. They hang
Mm.
out together all the time. Their kids hang out together. They go out, they go shopping together. They have tea and lunch together all the time. Like they're really good friends.
It's a far cry from the Akito that we were built to, but it's the growth, I think.
A lot of growth. In fact, Akito stopped holding family banquets. She
Hmm.
doesn't actually socialize with a lot of the family anymore. When she told them they were free, she meant it. She kind of hides herself away from the rest of the Somas. She still lives like as the head of the Soma family because the family needs someone to organize it and run it,
Mhm.
but she doesn't she lets Shigure handle a lot of that for her, so for her too. Like
God, what a pair those two are.
yeah, she lets Shigure handle a lot of the heavy emotional stuff because he can. And
Yeah.
she especially like I don't remember exactly what she had done with her mother, but I think she um I think she finally like told her mother to go stuff it.
Oh,
I mean, I can't you can't blame her.
no.
And a lot of people like
Um,
I read comments online like when I because I get a lot of Fruits Basket clips on my YouTube feed and stuff because I looked up one or two, so now it's like all over my recommendations. And the comments, people are like, Akito is evil and she should never be forgiven. Why is everybody forgiving her? The only one who never forgives her is Isuzu. Because Isuzu
mm,
had as bad as Yuki had it with her, with
yeah.
Akito, Isuzu had it almost as bad. I mean, Yuki kind of had it worse than she did, to be
Yeah.
honest.
And I do give them credit for mentioning that.
Even
Like, one
Yuki
of his.
managed to forgive her to an extent. But
Yeah.
Isuzu refuses to forgive.
Right.
She's the horse. The horses hold a grudge.
But to be fair, I do think that shows an interesting side to all of them is that Isuzu wouldn't, and why would she?
I can speak from
Um,
personal experience because I was born the year of the horse.
I mean, it's given what Akito did, and I think again that's another pro to this is just how just insane Akito acts as a villain for most of the show. How
Yeah,
manipulative, and whether it was
and
brought on her because of Ren or not. Yeah,
once you realize where that insanity is coming from, it's really hard to completely hold all of that against her because
right. And I
it's not how she wants to be.
right.
She understands early on. What she wants is she wants that feeling of acceptance and love that she was promised. That
Mhm.
she was raised being told on one hand that she was special and she would always have this love and acceptance from everyone because she was special. And then on the other hand, you have the other parent telling you you're nothing and these bonds are fake. This love and adoration everyone has for you is fake and it's going to evaporate into nothingness one day and no one loves you for real. So
But
like
I said this. Oh, go ahead.
both sides are like extremes of the same coin. And poor Akito was never taught how to find the medium between the two because everyone enabled both opinions.
Hmm.
Like everyone was enabling it. Like all of the Zodiac members were too afraid of they were too afraid to ever try to actually get loose from their connection. It wasn't
Yeah,
until the connection started to become really abusive that everyone was starting to become desperate to get away from it.
yeah. And to me, I think the beauty of this show is that there's like no like you could say Toru is like good and Akito and Ren are bad and whatnot, but nobody is like just outwardly like the good or the bad
I think, honestly,
because it.
if you really want to get really, really deep and philosophical about it, Akito and Toru are both the zodiac god. Akito was the lonely part,
Yeah,
the lonely, desperate part of the zodiac that wanted to keep everybody bound together to avoid being abandoned. And Toru was the happy, accepting part who was just happy to have everyone's friendship for as long as she had it. I think that's why they gravitated towards her so much. She was the love and acceptance that they were not getting from the actual zodiac god.
yeah.
She was that's what it is. I think that Akito and Toru are the two sides of the coin. And that's why the bonds with Akito finally started to break because new bonds were being formed with Toru.
Yeah. And
And
other people too.
other people, yes. Yuki's bonds started to break because yeah, he had that wonderful connection with Toru, but he fell in love with another girl. And it wasn't until he finally started to feel a sense of self-worth and understanding of himself that his curse lifted. In fact, I think Yuki's was the last of the curses to lift.
I wouldn't be surprised. It was fairly late because everybody does get their kind of own epilogue, I think. Um, but again, we can only do this show justice, and it's crazy to think how much we've heaped praise on it, but it's deserved every bit of it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hard pressed to find anything like it, good or bad, you know, because every show is going to be different. But again, if you
Uh,
want to experience it,
wait until you see what's up
no,
my sleeve next.
oh yes, um, she's going to show us Sailor Moon Crystal. I'll be that scrub lord and say I've never seen Sailor Moon. I know I didn't watch Pokemon as a kid. I didn't watch
Oh my
Sailor Moon
god.
as a kid. Well, I'm
It's
going to
deeply
get it.
wounding me here with the not ever seeing any of Sailor Moon thing. But
Well,
it's
again,
okay. It's a girly thing, kind of. But
hey,
it's got
hey, I
enough.
might end up getting another fruits basket out of the deal. So sue me. I don't know.
Okay, Sailor
Um,
Moon Crystal kind of adds a little bit of a manly edge to it. I'll give it that.
Yay, I love Edge, as long as it's not Edge Lord. Anyway, but,
No,
um,
no.
no, let's not get Tales of Berseria into this. That's its own thing. Anyway,
Plenty of hot
but
chicks
yes.
for you to drool over.
Wait, what?
I said there's plenty of hot chicks for you to drool over that aren't teenagers.
Oh, thank God. Anyway, I didn't say that. She did. Anyway, but yes, we'll cut it here. Like I said, I think we'll put this in the place that Speed Greffer was going to be because, again, there was just so much about the fruits basket stuff that we covered, and there's only so much that we couldn't even get into. But we'll cut it here. It has been a long podcast, but
Yeah,
I think it's been an enjoyable one.
I hope so.
Um, I mean, even though I did interrupt you way too many times from an account, but whatever.
Well,
That's
I
my only
interrupted you
problem.
a couple of times too.
Yay, it's all even. Good. But yes, I'll try to put this up on Saturday because we're recording this on a Thursday.
Hmm.
But yeah, so we'll get this out to you as soon as we possibly can. And then we'll move on to Sailor Moon Crystal because I'm watching anime on my own, but Lee's provided that. We're even going to watch Ruby all over again, which is amazing because I love Ruby. And
I'm
guess
not
what?
actually
I
caught
found,
up with it.
yeah, what's funny is I actually heard that Ruby's actually being shopped around and is potentially going to stay intact. So we're not out of the woods yet with Ruby, and I'm so grateful because they haven't finished it yet, and I want them to. Because we're not
Oh,
into season 10 yet. I want them to be. So it's perfect and
wow.
topical
I
and
haven't.
timely.
I was in the middle of season 6 when I stopped, so like I said, I'm
Oh,
not caught
it
up.
oh, it gets really, really intense and good. I know people love the super comedy stuff in 1 and 2, but it did need to get serious, and it does. Volume 9 is really I think volume 7 through 9 are really good. But we'll do that on our own as well. But I'll get to experience Sailor Moon. So hooray! We'll do Sailor Moon first and then Ruby, and then maybe do podcasts on that as well. But for me, I'm Citizen Strife. Leigh, anything else you want to mention before we head out?
No, not really. I still have the Etsy store up, and my commissions are open. There's a couple of like example pictures of things that I can do on the site. Um, but if you want anything made custom, just send me a message and I will work with you on what you want.
All right. But yes, for LeighClipse, this is Citizen Strife. Hope you guys enjoyed this super, super long, super, super awesome anime review. So we'll see you next time. Citizen Strife and LeighClipse signing out.